Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts off with us being brought into a noble's room, and a man reading a note, about him being removed from the family register. He says it feels like the god of fate is ridiculing him. The man's name is Ed Roth Taylor, and his life was over. Some students talk about him, and say there's no point in being afraid of him anymore since he was disowned and kicked out of his dorm. They say he shouldn't have rigged the entrance exam. We see Ed sitting on a bench, saying this is unfair. Because the Ed they are talking about isn't even him. He entered a game that is based in a magic school called Sylvania Academy. The game was called The Failed Swordsman of the Sylvania, and usually in webtoons when someone goes into a game, they either get to be a genius ruffian, or an SSS rank. Out of all of the possibilities, he ended up as a third-rate villain that is kicked out at the start. He possessed the worst character at the worst time. Ed says this is hella unfair. He's always lived frugal and without greed. Some other students call him shameless for saying these things, since he's lived that way. They walk away from him. Ed watches them leave, and looks at his stats in a mirror. He starts to flame the stats, but says it makes sense, as he was only briefly in the story. Then he remembers what happens to him after, and how in the end credits he was begging like a bum. But it makes sense as he was suddenly thrown into the streets, so he's lucky to be alive. He wonders why he possessed the body, but decides since he knows how Ed meets his end, he won't allow himself the same fate. He explains how rather than a school, the academy is closer to a city inside the mountains. He makes his way to the forest northeast of the academy, and that he's walked half a day to get here just to avoid the prying eyes of the other students. Which is plenty of time for him to understand the situation he's in. At this point when Ed was disowned, it was the starting point of the scenario. But it's important to note he wasn't expelled from school, which is very important as the setting is a top-notch academy. So if you graduate from it, you're guaranteed a good future. And as long as the game's set in the academy, he can use the information from being a player to make sure he does. So he can live a comfortable life, better than the one he left on Earth. The main goal now is graduation, but it comes with the issue of a giant tuition fee. This semester is paid for, but he needs to get a scholarship for the next semester. But his stats are straight booty cheeks. He needs to figure out how he's going to survive first. He needs food, clothing and shelter. He looks at the items he brought with his suitcases, and asks how he can get out of this. He has enough clothes, but food and shelter nope. He doesn't even have anywhere to stay tonight, given his reputation getting a job as a nope, and he can't go back to the dorm. So he is stuck in the woods for now. He's got a stream nearby which is good, and he has 10 days until school starts. So he plans to make himself suitable for attending school. We hear him chanting a spell called Windblade, and he's using it to cut some trees, but he's hella gassed out. He wonders why he's so gassed out after gassing 15 trunks, and it only made him hungrier. His stomach begins to growl, and he says he remembers his grandpa telling him when he was a kid that their food supply hit an all-time low, and he ate tree bark in the mountains. He puts it in a cup with water, and begins to boil it using the ignition spell. He says it kinda looks edible now. He munches on it and looks happy. Then starts to vomit out of pure excitement. It jumps to day 3 and he's looking mad healthy while holding a bundle of food. He says after starving for a day, and vomiting for the other one, he's learned wood should only be used to build a house. He starts to explain the building process, saying first you need to raise the frame that supports the wood. He struggles saying there are 4 supports, and it's not an easy job. Then he falls face first into the ground. He lifts it back up, then ties it all together, saying his frame is finally complete. He looks tired saying still a long way to go. He puts his clothes on the floor saying he has no choice. He falls asleep, and then the next day we see that he's made substantial progress on his little shelter. And he looks up to see a window saying his crafting proficiency has increased, and some other stuff about the shelter. Just general life skill information and games. He's still hungry as hell though. Since the actual Ed lived his life as a noble, he wasn't aware he was more talented with his hands than with magic. He has handiness level 4, but he needs it to survive. He makes a simple harpoon, by tying a dagger onto a stick. Ed shouts saying time to get some food. He wildly stabs into a river saying he's running on 2 days with an empty stomach, so this is pure desperation. He actually manages to get a few fish, then starts to cast ignition and uses a rock as a pan to fry it up. He has a week until school starts, so he just needs to hold on until then. He goes to take a bite, until a woman appears. He is surprised to see her, and she calls out to him. He says he didn't think he'd run into her out in the forest, as she's the one who got him kicked out of the dorms. Princess Fina, She asks why he's still here. Episode 1 of the failed swordsman of the Sylvania, it's called Stop Bothering Alia, and Ed appeared instantly in the game. He used his status as a noble to hit on the main character's childhood friend, but ended up being hit. But since he's vengeful and malicious, he messed with the main character's entrance exam, only to be caught by the princess who was hiding her identity. Phoenicia Elias Clowell. She has an ability called Insight, that detects when someone is lying, and she used all of this to expose Ed. Which got him out of the dorms, and made everyone hate Ed. She asks him again what he's doing here, asking why he isn't expelled. He says that he was only kicked out of the dorms. She says that she'll keep it short. Telling him to leave, she can't stand seeing someone so shameless around the school, she'll request his expulsion personally. While she yaps, he realizes that his food is burning, and he says this whole situation is a crisis. Since she's a princess, she truly has the power to get him expelled. He says he has a plan. He tells her the sun will set soon, and aren't the royals meant to be guarded, so to think a princess would come to this isolated forest all by herself. She says if he's trying to threaten her, he'll regret it. He says it's not a threat. He starts to kneel, saying he's just thanking her. She uses Insight, and asks what he means. But instantly sees that he's telling the truth. She's surprised. He says good, while explaining to us viewers that the Rothtailers are influential, but by using that name to exploit the citizens and doing human experiments for eternal life, they get hated by the main character. And they all end up being imprisoned or executed, but he's disowned now. His fish is burnt now, and he says it's better to eat that than to starve. But it's a good chance to convince Fina. Since if he doesn't, it'll be game over for him. He says that since there's a week until school, there's only one reason Fina is out in the woods. He tells her that since she's here without her guards, it must be for the class placement test. It's a test from Professor Glast, which tasks those who accept it to find magic beads in the forest. Ed says that it's a rough one, and since it's Fina, she'll for sure be aiming for Class A. She asks if he's trying to flatter her, saying he hasn't changed one bit, and she'll go get him expelled now. He tells her that without his help, she'll never be able to enter Class A. If his words are a lie, he'll accept the expulsion. He tells her to go to the lake at the southeast of the forest. She'll find a small grassy island with a giant tree in the middle of the island. The tree is called Marilda's guardian tree. Underneath in the roots, there will be a present that he's left for her. We see her holding a bead, and says that the Ed from a few days ago was definitely lying scum. However, the Ed just now is the complete opposite, and she's lost for words. It jumps to the class placement test finally being over, and Glass tells everyone to take out the beads they've acquired. We see some beads that do not belong in this manhwa. And he tells them all they'll start in Class F. The test isn't about finding any magic bead. And those who found beads lacking in magic power are the only ones to make Class A. Only 3 people found them. A man named Zix, a woman named Loratel, and lastly the one who found a bead with the highest magic power. None other than Fina, who is declared the top of the class. It jumps back to Ed Hernfish saying he doesn't have the strength to hold a spear anymore. We see he's made a crude fishing rod, and he's using a small nail as bait. He explains how since she was young, Fina has seen through flattery and sophistry, which led to her insight skill being developed. Which nobody can lie through, so he had no choice but to be honest with her. Which in turn will create a bigger problem, the reason why Fina will come to be called the Princess of Love. After being placed in F class. But now she won't end up in F class, since she found the bead. So the original story will begin to collapse. Even if he manages to avoid being expelled, all the information he has would become useless. We got roped along. Turns out that Fina isn't top of her class, it's a sleeping girl named Lucy Mayerl, so the future might not change. Fina starts to think about the situation, and how Ed didn't lie about the bead. But it isn't a present, she hid her identity since she didn't want special treatment. She wanted to prove herself. She knew the bead would give good results, but she didn't want to take it. Since it isn't something she'd have accomplished on her own, and the title Princess of Love isn't a skill or a stat, but a title she'd gained from walking a righteous path, he threw the bead out as bait. Whether it was the truth or not didn't matter, Fina could tell anyways. He believed that she'd fail, and she thought she'd succeed and rub it into his face. But Ed didn't lie to her about her not being able to enter A class, and Fina was left unable to do anything. Ed pulls his line out of the river, showing that he's actually managed to catch a fish. So he won't be starving today. It cuts to later, with him running in the woods. He says that he may be living far from school, and has to leave really early in the morning to get to school on time. But that's fine with him, as he's still in the academy. The school opening ceremony begins, and while a teacher is giving a speech, some of the other students start to whisper about Ed, asking how dare he show his face here. But we see him absolutely munching away, saying he plans to enjoy every minute of it. Some girls start to talk about how he looks like a noble as he eats, but they stop gossiping and head off to go find some desserts. One of the girls says that's strange, saying that Ed feels like a different person now. It jumps again to the dean's office, and Ed looks ghostly pale, saying he almost got expelled. He didn't think that Fina would tell the dean about him, though seeing how the dean was smiling, it must have not been bad. He sighs in relief, saying he needs to make sure the story doesn't stray from the original. Ed explains how his skills are focused towards survival currently, and to pair that with the magic he's training, there's no better weapon than a bow. As he domes a rabbit, he explains he'll be able to craft good quality arrows, and put magic formulas on them. While he's looking at the rabbit he caught, he's surprised when he sees the girl from earlier reading under a tree. We're introduced to her. She's Yannicka Faylover, and she's a genius spirit sorcerer. She looks over at him, and says it seems like he's the amusing one that Marilda was talking about. She quickly hops over, and introduces herself to him. She asks if he's surprised that she knows about him, and she explains that the forest is the territory of Marilda, a high-ranking spirit, and she talked about him. He asks what she said, and Yannicka says that Marilda is nosy, so she's been keeping an eye on Ed. He looks awkwardly at the rabbit he's holding, and doesn't know what to say. Yannicka reassures him it's fine, since natural order is for creatures in the forest to eat one another. Marilda doesn't mind. Ed says it looks like even a giant wolf has a tender heart, and Yannicka looks curiously, saying that's unexpected, and laughs. Then she says she has something to show him. She holds her hands out, saying that she signed a contract with this little guy yesterday. She asks if he wants to touch it, and he says if he wants to befriend her he needs to chime in at the right time, but quickly sighs, telling her he cannot see spirits. She's surprised that he can't, and he tells her yeah, and he only came for some food, so he'll be going. He decides it's best to try and keep the story just like the original, and Yannicka, someone who is very important to the storyline, is someone he must not get close to. She watches him walk away. She recalls him mentioning the wolf thing. Then pets Mardila, who is a wolf, saying it's interesting since it really seemed like he couldn't see her at all. So how'd he know she's a wolf? She jumps into Marilla's fur, saying she tried so hard to be nice to him, but he just answered with yep and yep over and over. She says geez. But it's not like they won't see each other again, so she'll just take it slow. Ed explains how the distance between his shelter and the academy isn't close at all. He barely makes it running at full speed, leaving at dawn. But it increases his stats, and if he wants the scholarship he has to study more diligently. He writes on a stone slab using a burned stick. On his way home he washes his clothes, then he checks if he has enough firewood and food for tomorrow. Which means he only sleeps for 4 hours. But that's not what is bothering him. He asks Yannicka how long she's going to keep following him. She's surprised he knew, and he says it'd be stranger if he didn't. He asks if she doesn't know who he is, saying he's the delinquent Ed, so why is she here? She says that's just what others think of him, and she smiles, saying she doesn't even know him yet. He says this is the type of character Yannicka is. She may look naive, but she's a really independent thinker. However, knowing what's in store for her in the future, he can't just respond with a blank smile on his face. Because Yannicka is the final boss of the first act. Even though she's the only character who smiles and is nice to him, he didn't want to do this. He says since destiny brought them together, can she do him a favor? She asks what all excited, and he says surely she can see that he's a mess. And that he's having a hard time. Then he asks her for some money. She turns into stone. He says he'll pay her back, and this is what friends are for. Asking how much money she has. He lets us viewers know that she's always the top of her class, so she has a scholarship. But her background is extremely poor, so without the scholarship she can't enroll or advance to a higher class in school. Being the daughter of a small ranch, her biggest weakness is money. She blankly stares at him, then says sorry while fading out. He looks guilty, and 3 days go by without her coming back. He says he feels bad about it, but he doesn't want to get entangled with the important characters. So he'll be careful so the story does not stray. He heads back into his shelter, then drops his basket out of surprise. Since someone even more important to the story than Yannicka just arrived, she's a rare genius and the most powerful character in the game. It's Lucy Mayerl, who is sleeping in his shelter. She wakes up, and he wonders why she's here. Saying he's too loud and she can't sleep. He says he wasn't saying anything, and she says not him. But the wolf behind him won't stop talking to him. Of course it's Marilda, who is asking him to someday save Yannicka at all costs. A few days later, Ed says Lucy has only been here for a few days. So surely it won't lead to anything, but of course that was just a complacent thought. It jumps to a joint combat training quest, with a ring and students cheering. It's a mock one-on-one combat exercise, to minimize the lethality students use fake weapons. Which will of course have the most important people in the game being put on the stage, and even the protagonist, who is the failed swordmaster, Taylor. Ed looks excited wondering if his match is next. He says he knows the results so he wasn't paying attention too much. Since the winners are first-year students like Taylor. Except for Yannicka, who tries to talk to Ed again. Who says he can't believe she's so nice even after he asked her for money. He says if Lucy is like a cat, Yannicka is closer to a dog. He tells her he doesn't care for the matches, and she asks what about his. He then starts to sweat nervously, asking if he has to fight. He says Ed would be expelled by now, so who is he even going to fight? Taylor gets on stage, saying he will perform to the best of his abilities. Ed says he just needs to focus on watching the match, since even if it was from a screen. He lived as Taylor for so long, from the miserable endings, to the true endings. He was there for it all, he did it countless times. There wasn't a single route that wasn't arduous and difficult, so he's cheering Taylor on to his fullest ability. Then the announcement asks for Lucy to appear on stage, and he wonders where the hell she went. He spots her feet sticking out while she sleeps, and he yells telling her to finish the duel first. It's Taylor fighting Lucy, and while Taylor has never held a sword before in his life, the first swing he does cuts through Lucy's lightning magic, which caught her off guard. He took the chance to close the gap, so she shot out another lighting spell, which overpowers Taylor, but Lucy gets disqualified for using intermediate magic. Making Taylor the first one to defeat Lucy, it was such a cool scene in the game. He watches as the match is finally underway, and Taylor charges in, to just instantly be deleted by Lucy. Taylor is knocked out, and Ed is completely silent. Lucy yawns, and the other students say nobody expected him to beat the top of the class after all. Taylor's life was always full of trials. He was a country bumpkin, and a failure of a student. He hadn't gotten a single decent grade since starting. He was a failure unacknowledged by anyone. We see Taylor slowly standing back up, as Ed says he's never lost hope ever. And he cheers him on in his head. Taylor charges back into Lucy, and as he gets close, Ed says now she'll use lightning magic, but he's surprised when he sees that she doesn't. She blocks Taylor's weapon with a wind spell, and he tries to break through it, but a beast made of wind roars at him, knocking him out of the stage, and into the wall past Ed. Brother's face is implanted into that shit, then falls down. Ed says this isn't how it was meant to happen. Lucy is declared the winner. And Taylor looks defeated. Ed is surprised since Taylor wasn't meant to lose. Ed watches Taylor walk away, and says this is a big problem. He cannot leave him alone. The magic used is due to forming a contract with Marilda. She approaches Ed, asking if he'll give her jerky. He ignores her, and Fina tries to talk to him too, but he ignores her as well. Which surprises her, since he looks pissed. He calls out to Taylor, saying he doesn't know if this'll matter, but it's better than just sitting still. Taylor stops walking and Ed tells him not to give up on his efforts. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. He tells Taylor he did great, and to be proud. It was just an unlucky matchup. He tells him not to let this get him down. He just really doesn't want to be the one to have to deal with all of the problems if Taylor isn't around. We don't get to see what Taylor said if anything, and instead the Emperor Cloel is telling Fina she's got a God's blessing, though her ability wasn't given by God, but rather as we know it's something developed from how she lived her life. Which is how she's so confident. The rest of the imperial family looked up to Fina, though it was empty remarks. She pretended not to know about it. We see Ed telling her to go easy on him, and she says the same thing to him. Some students mention how Ed was yelling at Taylor. One of them asks why he's making fun of someone who got bodied. Another suggests he's just trying to seem like a nice guy by cheering him on. Fina says they are right about how Ed acts. In the past he was definitely someone who was shameless. But there's got to be more to him now. Since earlier that was desperation when he was shouting to Taylor, and his words were all the truth. The match is called to start, and Fina says his actions confuse her. She says she'll come to a conclusion with this duel, and starts to cast magic. He says she'll shoot this as a test, and launches an aqua ball at him. She wonders how he'll react, and watches intently, but he doesn't do anything. And she's lost by this. He falls to the floor, and says he lost. She starts to panic, and says she watched him track the trajectory. The students watching begin to laugh, saying he's worse than Taylor, and it's a joke he got one hit. Ed tells Fina he learned a lot, and she asks what he's planning. And then she realizes he's not even made eye contact with her a single time. She's declared the winner. She realizes he had no interest in the duel, and that's because Ed doesn't think there's any reason to. He needs to focus on making sure the story doesn't get changed, since Fina is important to the story, but Taylor, the protagonist of the world, is arguably more important. He looks flustered, trying to figure out where he is. And Fina calls out to him. He sees her panting. And he asks what she's doing here. She barks at him, saying that's her question. And he says he learned a lot from the duel. She chews him out, saying my ass. He didn't even intend to win. And he just wanted off the stage fast. She says she's already having a hard time with the fox-like merchant. She means Loretel, and how Glast is just a pile of grumpiness. All of this, and the servants won't shut up about living like a noble. She has enough to deal with, so why is he complicating her mind even more? He's surprised she has this much frustration. He grabs her shoulders, telling her to take a deep breath and to calm down. Saying there's no need to get worked up, he guides her on breathing properly. And after a few deep breaths, she covers her face, asking what just happened. She looks flushed, saying to please forget about this. He starts to sneak off, and she says she's got a bad habit. She starts talking about how she's always trying to predict what's in people's heads, and Ed just wants to go. She says she'll ask bluntly, and that he cut his ties with his family since he knows about their dark side, right? The reason he picked on Taylor is because he needed a reason to be expelled. He says it's a sharp deduction, but it's mostly wrong. The dark side was correct. But he looks down and plays clueless. She says there's no way she is wrong, and asks what those words he yelled at Taylor were about. Asking if he never disliked him from the start, Ed says no, and he just wanted to make fun of him. And since everyone hates him, he thought cheering on Taylor would be good. She says anyone can tell he's lying, and to look her in the eyes while he says it. He says he's telling the truth, and her insight detects it as a lie. He says he's telling the truth, and she starts stomping her feet. She starts to get hella mad, but calms herself down, saying she can't say anything since she has no evidence. So she'll let him go, and he's been staring at the door for a while, right? He thanks her as he leaves, and he says this is the first time she's shown this side of herself. And it's his fault for being a new addition to the story. He says it may be a bit out of line, but she looks really worn out and it's important to pay attention to the complicated politics. But she should relax a bit, as she shouldn't worry too much, especially while being in the academy. She's lived her entire life seeing through others, but this is the first time someone has saw through her. He begins to run, saying he's lost too much time. If Taylor gives up his comfortable life, no, even the entire world might end. He finally sees him, but doesn't know what to say. But we hear a woman's voice saying to stop, and it's Alia, Taylor's childhood friend. She says he's already having a hard time without him, so please don't harass Taylor. Taylor stands up, saying so you're still in school, and Ed sees that he's revived. A fighting spirit that never falters no matter how strong his enemy is, he sees now. While he was dueling Fina, his biggest cheerleader Alia ran to him and consoled him. Taylor asks what business he has with him. Ed is hesitant, then says he saw he's great with the blade. Taylor wonders what he's scheming, but Ed turns around saying he's not planning anything. He treated him like a pushover, but in reality he doesn't need to. Which relieves him, since he's obviously the main character. But since Taylor is fine, that's all he needed. Taylor and Alia wonder why he's trying to act cool. He walks outside, then hears a loud sound. He looks over to see a giant fire pillar from the arena. He says everyone originally witnessed this while in their seats at the Nail building, as a giant fire spirit, and Lortele casts some kind of ice spell, which freezes the beast. The ice starts to crack, as we see Yannicka riding atop the spirit's head. She's smiling, and Ed explains how he's sure Taylor and Alia are watching this. Taylor looks surprised. He hopes Taylor is paying attention, as one of his very first trials is about to start. Which will be the final boss of this act, Yannicka. It cuts to her being congratulated by the students, and she thanks them while laughing. Then she looks over to see Lortele being carried out by a stretcher. She feels nothing but guilt, but the students around her won't stop saying how she's their pride. We see a whole group trying to praise her. And Ed says that Yannicka already had friends, but this incident stirs a lot of trouble for her. But it's for the better, as he won't be seeing her at the camp. 2 weeks later, he says without having to worry about the main characters he could focus on survival. So he made a fishing net, and we see that his stats have increased a lot too, or he just wanted to flex. He steps out of the river, and we see Yannicka trying not to stare. She asks if he enjoys being naked. He asks what the hell she's doing here, and he asks why she keeps coming back. She says it's like a top secret base, so it makes her excited. Also, she wanted to talk to him more. And she needs some advice. He asks what it is. She says he left early so he might have not seen it, but at the combat training a few weeks ago she hurt Lortelle. He recalls that Lortelle should have used intermediate magic, but it wouldn't be important for Yannicka to know. She says she keeps trying to forget the incident, but she can't help but thinking she overreacted. She asks if she should apologize, but her friends won't stop saying Lortelle was in the wrong. Ed says to apologize then, if she thinks she's right. He explains how Yannicka is lovely, and kind to everyone. So if she ever felt guilty or self-critical, but everyone would just blindly take her side. So Yannicka probably came to him, specifically because she knew he wouldn't follow suit. She stretches saying she's glad he doesn't blindly take her side. He apologizes if it offends her. She says that's not it. She doesn't feel offended at all. She says Ed wasn't like this last year. She may be a bubbly person, but she is very observant. Even when he asked her for money, she could tell it was just him trying to chase her away. She says she finds him reassuring. She wishes everyone was more like Ed, and she laughs. The night continued. Then the next day we see Ed walking down a hallway, saying this is hella bad. While The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania is considered a masterpiece, only a few people have seen the ending. Since most people get bad endings early on, if you save a girl during an ambush in a kobold's test you'll witness the secret of the golden daughter Lortelle, then the Detective Conan guy would kill you. In another episode, if you skip partying with Alia, and form a unit with Lortelle, Alia will fall off a cliff and die. If you protect Lortelle from the fire spirit Tarkan that Yannicka summons, you die. We hear Lortelle talking to Ed, and he says he needs to go quickly since she's nothing but bad endings. He asks how long she'll follow him, and she says she didn't think he'd ignore her for so long. He says of course he would. She's the fourth main heroine, and the business magnate Elt Kesheln's only daughter. She smiles saying she'd like to buy 2 hours of his time. He explains how she's designated as a hidden hero. Unlike Fina, Lortelle is treated like a villain from the start. And her true colors are only revealed later on into the story. When players finally learn her true nature, they are given a crossroad between Fina and Lortelle. She calls out to him again, and he ignores her saying he can't fall for it, since if he does he'll lose his advantage. She says surely he can just hear her out, saying she just wants to help a little. She stops in front of him, saying that seeing him is an inspiration to her. Even under difficult circumstances he continues learning. Of course he's known for being arrogant and self-centered. She doesn't care about that. So listen to her offer. She says she'll give 3 gold coins as down payment. And she asks him to help her befriend Yannicka. He says those gold coins are some people's monthly earnings. He gets in her face, asking if she always buys connections with money. She puts the gold into his pocket, saying to keep it for now. And in regards to his question, she knows the more people on her side the better. He says she surely knows she's going to be in a political fight with Fina over control of the academy. So she's starting to gain allies. He smiles saying fine. And she smiles back, and they shake hands. He says that normally people who fall for this end up getting addicted, and some even sell their families away. So preying on that desperateness is simple. Sadly that's how it should have been. We see the gold coins in her hand, and she smiles saying that's amusing. As she watches Ed leave, he grits his teeth saying he really needed the money. But he can't get in between Yannicka and Lortelle. Later that night, we hear Lortelle call out to Yannicka. She says that she didn't expect to see her here. Yannicka says she looks really different with her hair down. Lortelle looks very intent on making Yannicka one of her people. She tells Yannicka there was a lot of fuss about her using intermediate magic, and she wanted to apologize if given the chance. Yannicka says she can see her wounds haven't healed yet. Lortelle says she's sure it'll heal quickly, so don't worry about it. Yannicka says her talk with Ed must have gone well. Lortelle asks what she's suddenly saying. Yannicka says she usually tells them to restrain themselves, but the spirits sure do love to chatter. She tells her she sometimes catches on conversations. Lortelle realizes that she must have heard her trying to pay Ed to befriend Yannicka. Yannicka walks beside her, saying you can't buy sincerity with money. And to her, the way Ed acts is much more approachable. Janix awkwardly laughs, asking if she acted too smug, saying she's quite embarrassed. But she heads off, saying she needs to get going now, and it takes a lot of preparation to form a contract with a high-rank spirit. She's been getting more support so she needs to work hard. Tells Lortelle there's one more thing, and that she's sorry about the other day. saying she hopes she gets well soon. Lortel quickly realizes that she is very different than she imagined originally. But she says that Yannicka looks strangely on the edge. We see Yannicka in her dark room, saying she has to work harder because when people expect good things from you. IIT jumps to morning, and we see Ed's clothes all being hung to dry, and Lucy says it reeks. And his clothes get instantly knocked off as she flies off. We hear a woman asking who is there. He looks over to find the senior maid of the finest dorm, the Awfulest Hall. Her name is Belle Maya, and she's the one who kicked him out. He quickly explains to her the situation, but she looks around saying Jancia already told her. But she didn't think he'd be living like this, and it's good to see a good change for him. Sadly her words fell on deaf ears, as he was staring elsewhere. He explains how the Awfulest maids are all pretty much Olympic Giga Chad maids, and they are all forklift certified. He's staring at the basket she's carrying, saying it must be the best ingredients she could find in this forest. He starts to think if she'd affect the story, and she says he doesn't need to be so respectful. She can talk to her like when he was in the dorm. He says nah, she's surprised and he asks how he could talk down to a maid who is always hard-working. And he decides since she's not crucial to the plot, he should befriend her. She tells him about the stuff inside of the basket. It cuts to later and we see he upgrades his fishing net farm. He's got plenty of meat now, so his dietary needs are almost taken care of. He puts his cup on the campfire, then ignites the bottom to boil the water. We see that his wind and fire spells are both level 10 now, and he says he's been using them too damn much. He ended up making herbal tea due to the info Belle told him about. He takes a sip, saying he's done with his work now. Yet the sun hasn't set, and he has to admit how much fun he's having. He spots something flying in from overhead, and he says of course something would happen. It crashes into his camp, completely knocking him down, and in the dust he wonders what the hell is going on. Since his camp just got wiped out, he hears someone panting. Lucy says that just about killed her. He asks what she's talking about, and she shakes in fear saying Belle Maya. He says she's a good person though. She says that she was really moody and came to her with her fist clenched. So she teleported out of there suddenly. She says she thought she was going to be hurt. Ed is pissed, and Lucy asks for food. He smacks her saying she ruined everything. She says ow, and he quickly realizes she isn't using any protective spells. She tells him she ran out of magic. He laughs, saying that's a good thing, and this is for his house she destroyed. He flicks her forehead, then says this is for Miss Belle Maya, and flicks her again. He says he needs a sturdier house, so he needs to build a house out of real wood. But being as busy as he is, it's a big plus to gain knowledge in the library. He says he figured most of it out, now he just needs to figure out how to smoothen the wood and finish the roof. A girl tells him it's closing time, and says he's studying hard. He asks if it's been a while, and apologizes. She says it's fine, and seeing someone work so hard boosts her motivation. She introduces herself as Elka Island. He says it's like she's using her puppy dog eyes to tell her his name. He reluctantly tells her his name, and she instantly makes an oh shit face. He says it's a familiar face. But it's fine, since he's used to the discrimination now. She says he's hella different from the rumors. He's been reading all the books that are even too hard for her to understand, and he's read 6 of them easily. They all say he's arrogant, but they don't know him, and it seems like rumors aren't to be trusted after all. She says she knows someone who is just as sincere as he is. She says she'll be cheering for him, and he says thanks. She tells him to have a safe trip back, and she's going to clean up and head back to her dorm. Then a loud rumbling begins to shake the entire library. Elka looks up to see a shadow, as a bookshelf and all of its books begin to fly toward her. As it's time for the episode 1 final showdown, the Glaskin Showdown. A large purple beam can be seen from the academy. We learn that, thanks to Taylor and his friends' efforts, many students gathered at the main square. It's been 2 hours since the disaster started. Alia says she's seen this once. It's a summoning rune to summon the highest ranked spirit of darkness, Glaskin. Fenia says this is bad news, as only one person can summon this many spirits. And it's highly likely that the person behind all of this went berserk due to Glaskin, and that it's Yannicka Faylover. The students are speechless. Taylor says this isn't the time for this. If Alia is right, then the barrier around the students will only buy some time. If Glaskin is summoned, then there will be casualties, so they need to head inside the student center. The captain of the Royal Guard, Claire, says people outside the barrier will notice in no time, so if they deal with it soon. Alvira, an alchemy student, cuts him off saying it's not a problem that can be dealt with outside. Even the principal Obel is out of town too. but if everyone here were to join hands, they might be able to take down a high-ranked spirit. A man named Klebias says he's against it. Not only does she want them to get through the intermediate level spirits, but then they'll have to deal with 2 high-ranking spirits, Tarkan and Velosfer. He says that's suicide, and he's not doing it. Lortel asks if she did this all on her own, saying this is way too much power. Alia says it's most likely Velosfer's power, and it's using her as a medium to manifest it. And that spirits of darkness are the natural enemies of spirit sorcerers. Their enormous power is simply beyond a spirit sorcerer's control, and the demons take control of the spirit sorcerer, which is what all spirit sorcerers know. Yet how Yannicka was able to manage to command Velosfer isn't known to anyone. Zix says none of this matters, and the best thing to do is decide their course of action, and only one person can do that. So he asks Fina about it. She's hesitant and everyone looks to her awaiting for her order. And then she recalls Ed's words to her, about having some peace of mind. She says if only it were that easy. She says they'll enter in an hour. But only her guard Claire, and the top students from each year in class. So make preparations and ready yourselves, she'll take responsibility for it all. Some random appears, saying they are done assessing the teaching area. The Audrey Hall and Potion Archives are in the middle of a strike. So they won't join, she says then it's all up to them then. The random says there's no other students, until a woman appears saying there is one. She just came from the library, and in there is her friend, an apprentice librarian, with a sophomore student. Fina asks for her friend's name, she says it's Elka Island. Zix asks if she's really talking about Elka, she says yes. And he says he needs to rescue her now, since she's powerless. Lortel tells him to calm down, saying that Yannicka is their priority. Fina says that's right, and she said Elka was with another student. So believe in the student for now. Fina asks who the other student is, but the girl is scared. Zix grabs her saying to spit it out, she mumbles Ed. Saying it's Ed Roth-Taylor, Zix looks furious, she apologizes to him saying he was there until way late tonight. She was annoyed so she left it to Elka, and they all know what type of man Ed is, right? But Elka doesn't care about rumors. The other students start to say it's not good if she's stuck with someone so shameless. Zix starts to get pissed and Fina and Lortel quickly try to stop him from leaving. Fina tries to convince him to have faith in Ed. Everyone else is lost, as hell, and even she's a bit worried about what she said. Zix is silent then leaps past them all. But he sees some spirits in front of him. He instantly defeats them, saying if he touches even a single hair on her head, he will rip his off. We finally get some backstory on Zix. We see him tracking something in the woods, and he says he's found it. While he watches a deer from the bushes, we see a knife, and the deer is surprised, as it sees Zix flying at him from overhead, and he kills it. Zix was a descendant of the tribes in the north, but he was abandoned way before any of this. We see people looking at him with fear and disgust while he drags the deer in the street. They recognized him as a descendant of the northern grasslands, a barbarian, and see him as a beast. A girl asks for his name, it's Elka, and he tells her. She laughs, saying he's like a wolf in a human's body. She is surprised, and he drops the deer. She asks if he is okay. He begins to cry, realizing how lonely his life has been. Elka and her father welcomed him into their family. Chasing after the fast-paced life of civilization, his savage life became a distant memory at some point, and the wolf became a man. He says he's heard of the rumors about Ed, so he knows his reputation. He cheated on the test, insulted the princess and harassed a woman. We see Zix hauling straight cheeks down the hallway, then he spots Ed who is bloodied up. He asks who he is, but Zix ignores him asking where Elka is, and asks why he's here. He tells him where she is. He runs over him on his way to Elka. Then opens the door, asking if she's okay, but he sees her asleep, and Ed's jacket covering her legs. He starts to shake, saying thank God, and that he's genuinely grateful. He looks around, saying these bookcases are huge, and would be hard for a fully grown man to lift. Yet they are all places as if they're trying to protect her, along with the curtains to block the spirit's vision. Then he sees on a chalkboard, it says not to panic when you wake up and to wait here. Everything will be solved before dawn, so block the entrance, and not to act rashly. Zix realizes someone protected Elka, then he notices blood on the jacket, and that it isn't hers. And he starts to piece it together, that the blood leads outside to where Ed was laying. So Ed is the one who saved her, but why? Ed thinks that he was so close, and 3 hours ago when the bookcases started to collapse he saved Elka, and says he's glad he did some strength training. And based on the rune in the sky, it's the Glaskin showdown. He's sure Taylor will do it, and he should actively avoid the area with the main characters, since he cannot let the future change. Even so, he cannot sit idly, and he began to block everything off for Elka, and he says he'll just study more until it's over. Then he says that what makes Yanika's power so special is her strong command of spirit understanding and spirit connection. Since meeting spirits itself is part of Yanika's talent, and Ed can't see spirits, so raising his spirit stat is close to impossible. He sees a group of spirits charging at him, but prepares a wind spell. He thanks the event for the free meal, and his ignition leveled a few times, but his spirit connection and understanding both went to level 7. He says if only he got it to one more level, flashback ends. And he says one more level would have made it possible to contract a spirit. Zix comes out asking what he's doing here. Ed wonders why he's asking, and tells him training, saying he doesn't need to lie. Zix sighs, and thinks to himself only naive people would believe he's here training. It's true though. Zix says he understands what kind of person he is now, and that it seems like this is who he has always been. He bows his head saying he truly owes him a big one in the future. And when the time comes, he'll repay this debt to him. Ed thinks to himself saying he forgot Elka and Zix were lovers, since she barely came into the story. But Zix is Taylor's friend who followed him from the start of the story, so he's important. Ed says he must have left the student center to come here, right? If he's confirmed Elka's safety, then to go back and finish what he's meant to at the student center. He says to go help Taylor and do what he says. Zix asks if he means Taylor McClure. Ed says yes, and Zix says he doesn't know why Ed thinks so highly of Taylor, saying he's never talked to him. Ed says it's more complicated than that, but since the shell of Tarkan can only be harmed by element slash, it means Taylor has to be the one to defeat it. Zix thanks him again for the advice, and Ed says to move quickly. Ed sighs watching him leave, saying he hopes it goes like the original story did. Then he says wait a minute, wondering why Zix isn't friends with Taylor yet. Since they were meant to have sparred, and Taylor uses element slash to cut through Zix's magic, but still loses. They became friends, then he realizes since this whole scene happened so early, they never got the chance to meet. But this means Taylor doesn't know element slash either, so nobody in the raid team can deal any damage to Tarkan. He didn't even realize how much the plot has begun to fall apart from it. Back at the student center, Zix comes back saying he apologizes for how he acted. Fina says to forget it, even with him here they'd have lost. They failed their first attempt. Claire says if they want to make another attempt, they need reinforcements, and he'll join once the pain in his leg is gone. Fina tells him to just rest, since he can't even walk. He tells her that if she cares about him to rescind her order. She says that she has a heart too. She says it's unfortunate, but Claire is out. And Clabias is also injured. She wonders if there's a way out. She says they just need to eliminate Tarkan, but we hear Ed saying there's not enough time to get to him. Some of them are afraid to see him, and he says judging from the ritual progress it'll be complete soon. He says to split the groups into two, he'll take care of one side. He's being forced to intervene in the story. There's a whole strategy displayed. If any of you are curious, you can pause to read it. They are still lost on why Ed is here, and Clabias asks if this looks like a joke. Zix tells him to hear him out first. Ed says they need to get through Tarkan and deal with Velos for who's overpowered Yannika, but they've surely seen that Tarkan cannot be damaged due to his shell. The best bet is getting one team to take Tarkan's attention, and the other group goes to subdue Yannika. Lortel says there's no way, and they only manage to escape due to luck, and what'll happen if the luring group fails, and Tarkan starts to chase the other group, or if the luring group wipes out. It's too much of a risk. Ed says you can only weigh the risk when there are other options. The most important objective is to take down Yannika, that way Tarkan is powerless. Zix asks who would be in the luring group. Alvira says that's just asking people to die. Taylor raises his hand, saying that he'll do it. Ed says no, and don't act up and get back since he's going to be in the subjugation group. Taylor says he's quick, but if someone should do it, he should be the one. Ed says they are wrong, and they aren't picking sacrificial lambs. They don't exactly need to split in half either. He says that he, Clabias and Lortel are enough to lure Tarkan. They both say they don't wanna. Ed tries to tell them there's a wind to bind his feet, but they aren't interested. Fina speaks up, saying she doesn't see anything wrong with what he's saying. But she doesn't understand his intentions. She sighs. And says this is her order as the third princess, and they'll split into two raid groups like Ed's requested. And that the subdue group will have Taylor, Zix, Alia, herself and Alvira. and the rest minus Claire will be in the other group. She says she'll keep it short, so just don't die and stay safe at all costs. In the nail hall corridor we see Tarkan, and Lortel asks how he's planning to do this. He tells her to just do what he says, and they'll definitely win if they do. He tells Clabias not to worry, and explains how he lacks confidence. He tells him he'll definitely be able to do it. Clabias says Ed looks full of confidence, and wonders if he has a way. Tarkan begins to get up from laying down. He only came here because he was convinced by Fina. He smiles, saying since he isn't alone he might be able to muster some courage. He runs at Tarkan, who begins to roar. Clabias asks Ed how the hell he's meant to lure him out, but when he turns around he sees both Ed and Lortel aren't there anymore. And he starts to nervously sweat, while Tarkan is behind him. Then he starts to breathe down his neck. He starts to run, yelling that he's been tricked. He yells, and we see Lortel outside. She exhales, then recalls the plan. Ed told her to get out of here, while Clabias lures it. She asks if his plan is just to sacrifice him, saying he won't evade moral criticism. He says it isn't a sacrifice, and despite how Clabias looks, he's a top student. So he's pretty strong. Also, the most important role will be Lortel's. Outside of the hall we see her channeling a spell, and we learn her job is to land a critical attack on Tarkan. She talks to herself, saying you really can't trust rumors. He tells Ed that everyone is going to hesitate and doubt themselves, but Lortel is good at this stuff. She launches her icicles at the side of the nail hall. We see a massive explosion, and the wall begins to collapse, as she's now created a gap for the subjugation team to enter with. She asks them all what they are doing standing there, and tells them to go in. She says she broke the hall last time during the duel, and this must be why he left it to her. She says Ed is an amusing guy, and this is all set up. She looks over, and sees Clabias running away from Tarkan. She starts to prepare for her next attack, while Clabias keeps hauling Cheeks away. While she recalls Ed saying they can't defeat Tarkan inside the hall, and apprehending it will be touch. She tries to tell Ed she lost to Tarkan once in the practice duels already. And he has a bag saying this'll take care of Tarkan's shell. We see Ed making it upstairs, and Lortel shoots an attack off at Tarkan, then makes an ice wall to block it off. But Tarkan breaks through it, and he says that she's right, without element / nobody can damage it. He kicks a door open for roof access, saying they just need overwhelming firepower. And he finds Lucy slumped out, and he recalls the guide saying that Lucy is asleep on the oval hall, but he's done this so many times already. He picks her up, and he wonders how the hell she considers this a nap. He says she's here since the camp was destroyed, and since she's scared of Bel Maya she'd always use her magic power to run away, then fall asleep. She wakes up saying she smells jerky, and she sees it in Ed's hand. He shoves it into her mouth. Then gets ready to launch her. He wonders if he'll get the distance right and yeets her, telling the rest to hide. Tarkan goes for a breath attack, and Lucy starts to cry saying he's so mean. She lands right in the middle of them, then begins to prepare an attack. She uses high-rank magic, called Divine Punishment. And a giant purple cluster of lightning begins to streak down towards Tarkan, illuminating the entire courtyard as if the sun was out. Lortel shields herself and Clabias, and Ed has to hold onto the railing of the roof. He says this is important. Since Tarkan's shell is starting to break down, now all attacks will land. He starts to run downstairs, saying the last hit will be his for the experience. It cuts to Yannicka, recalling a memory with her mother saying she's proud of her. Then she starts to recall a bunch of empty words of people saying the same shit to her over and over, just singing her praises. And as if she's stepping on glass to avoid doing anything to make them dislike her. We see another explosion, and Yannicka says it looks like everyone is here. She says she should smile, and welcomes them all. And behind her is Velosfer, who has her chained up. He begins to float into the air while looking down on the students. It jumps to Ed, who wonders if they've started yet. He says it should end by the break of dawn, but he's not too late either. As he's made it to Tarkan, Ed asks Lortel where Lucy is. She says she's rolling around a corner. He says it'd be great if she finished the job, as Clabias runs from Tarkan. We see her slumped out. Ed says they need to cut Tarkan's throat, but magic won't be precise enough, so he'll do it. She tries to tell him to let Clabias do it since Ed is in the magic department, but he's afraid. He tells her he'll take responsibility and end this, so stop Tarkan's movement once. And he's betting on her with his life on the line. She sighs, saying he says this way too easily, and in reality it's just a gamble. He says the price of his life isn't cheap, and it's closer to an investment. She smiles, saying investments are her area of expertise. She starts to prepare a magic spell, saying she likes him more than Fina. Saying she'll put her life on the line for him too. Ed pushes in and Klabias runs saying he can't do it anymore. Tarkan roars, and begins a breath attack at Ed who is running in. Ed begins to cast some wind magic, but says he isn't close enough. He hears a scream and turns around, to see a giant red hand in the sky over the oval hall. Ed says this means Taylor's party is in their final phase, which means it's going well, but the timing is bad. Since the scene would catch anyone's eye, Tarkan begins to launch his attack toward Ed, but Lortel hits it, blocking the hit for Ed. She tells him now is his chance to attack. Ed says that Lortel doesn't make mistakes, and slides in saying this is the chance. He says he's cast this spell thousands of times. He shoots off a wind blade, which takes Tarkan's head off. Tarkan begins to fade out, and a status window says he's taken down Tarkan, and all of his spirit magic stats begin to increase, and he unlocks the ability to contract with a spirit now. He looks back saying it's Taylor's turn. He leaps into the giant hand in the sky, and a bright light can be seen, as it gets hit with multiple slices from Taylor, causing it to shatter and explode. He begins to fall out of the sky, and Ed says he's the protagonist for a reason. The purple barrier surrounding them begins to shatter, and fades out, meaning it's over. Morning comes around, and Lortel says she's met many people saying they are risking their lives, but they are cowards. Ed gives a simple answer, and she says that they just went through so much, but he's lacking sentiment. She says she'd like to reintroduce herself to him, and reaches her hand out. He shakes it with her, then sees the gold coins from earlier. She says she's won this time, and now he owes her a favor, so what'll he do now? She smiles, saying she'll see him later. He notices someone Taylor running over, and he says that he's still resenting him. Ed is fanboying saying he looks hella cool. Taylor says despite what happened in the past, a debt is still a debt, and bows. Thanking him. Klabias tells Taylor he doesn't need to respect someone like that, and he almost died because of him. Zix, Lortel and Fina all tell him to shut up. She then tells Ed she can recommend him to the student council, but he says he'll pass. Lucy was the biggest contributor in taking Tarkan down, and Taylor took down Velosfer and Glaskin. So focus on that. Alvira asks why he's throwing credit away, asking if he's embarrassed. Zix tells her to show respect, since he's a senior. She barks at him. He repeats it. Ed says he's been trying to avoid the main characters, but seeing them like this, he can't help but feel warm and fuzzy. Since he's spent so much time with them, helping them with their problems too. Taylor who grows with every trial, and Alia who grew with him. Fina who embraces her destiny as a monarch, Zix who finds his path in human civilization. Klabias who finally gains confidence, and Alvira who realizes life isn't about only fun and excitement. Lortel who spent her life with gold, realizes that's not all that matters. All of them are important to the story, and the reason he was successful is because he knew about them all. Lortel looks over to see Ed is gone, and we see him lifting a rock, and he's rummaging through the rubble of the fights, and he makes his way to the sparring stage. He sees a cupboard on the ground, and opens it and he sees inside that Yannicka is laughing, but covered in wounds. He realizes he couldn't leave without her. It flashbacks to him asking Lortel if she knows why Yannicka went berserk. Lortel says she has an idea, and she happened to see Yannicka's room. Everything in there was a symbol of gratitude and sincerity, but there wasn't any space to do anything. All of the post-it notes probably weighed down on her. The solution was easy, she just had to remove everything and put it into a corner, but she had the inability to do that. She was too obsessed with trying to honor all of their goodwill. But that was dangerous and Velosfer exploited that weakness. But why did it happen a month earlier than he was meant to? Originally the hero of that scenario was Taylor, but with Lucy bodying him all of the students flocked to Yannicka instead. Matilda and Lucy's contract was the reason Taylor got one shot, and she was able to form that contract due to her frequent visits to Ed's camp. And the person who allowed all of that, was a character who was meant to be gone in the first episode. It ends and Yannicka says she understands why Lucy naps here, it's cozy but she didn't expect to be found so easily. She says the others forgot about her in the midst of the chaos, she thought they'd look for her after. She tucks her knees in more, saying she'd like to have stayed inside for a bit longer. He asks her why, and she says it's because she's about to ugly cry. Ed looks at her, recalling Marilda's words, and he says it must be for this situation. But that's weird, since only Ed should know the future. But says Marilda was smart for knowing that Ed was trustworthy. Yannicka failed when trying to form a contract, and it made her susceptible to the darkness. She was always studying magic, and she smiled to everyone around her. But he knows she struggled alone, saying the failure itself is also beautiful. He calls out to her. Then tells her that she's worked hard. Ed says on the front stage a parade of proud main characters exist, but behind the stage is dark and quiet. As the first act's villain exits the stage right as the main characters emerge. He's witnessed the first stage countless times, but it's only now that he finally understands more about it, as he can see the spirits that are worrying about Yannicka. He says this is the only time he's truly seen the act to the end, due to his spirit skills being level 10, some spirits around Yannicka are interested in Ed. Marilda is one of the spirits. It jumps 10 days since the end of Yannicka's disciplinary committee trial. She acknowledged all of her mistakes, and testified saying she'd accept her punishment. But during her first trial, the professors and other students expressed their utmost support. During her second trial, Fina said that Yannicka didn't do anything intentionally. Lortel stepped forward, and compensated the funds for restoration, but they were smart enough to limit the amount of fees she could slap atop it. The outcome of all of this was the removal of any benefits to top students, taking back all of the prizes and decorations, and disqualification from entering the Ophilis for the next semester. They only suspended her for 20 days, and took expulsion off the table. Ed said it felt like a heart-touching moment in a drama. We see the students can tell she's under a lot of stress, and they decide it's time to step up. They bring out a mountain of diabetes, and tell each other not to mention the incident. We learn their names are Anis and Clara. And they both stare at Yannicka waiting for her to eat, but instead Yannicka asks if there's a difference in liking and loving someone. They are both confused, asking why she's saying this. She says it's about her friend, and her friend had a dream where she was making a crown of flowers, and a man appeared on a horse. It's just Ed on a horse. She puts the crown on his head, and they laughed while running through the field. Yannicka tells them it's her friend's dream, and they completely understand she's talking about herself. Anis asks what else her friend said, and when Yannicka starts to say she can't stop thinking about the man, Anis quickly flees. Clara makes a PTSD face, and says she's got to be very careful. She turns and looks at her, and says she can't let anyone else find out she's in love. She tells her that she shouldn't think of this without any complications, and whether you like or hate someone it's a mystery. Clara says it's better for her to be honest about her emotions, her friend she means. Yannicka says that she's hit the nail on the head. Clara tells her to be careful about talking about the topics, as it's not good for her friend's reputation. Yannicka says she almost goofed. She says she's got to go back to report for her suspension. Clara says she'll be there later, she's got to sort her thoughts out. She waves bye to Yannicka, then headbutts the table saying she did it. It jumps back to Ed, and he says that, thanks to Fina, his semester fees were waived. So with the gold he's been saving, he purchased some tools. He spots Yannicka twiddling with her fingers, and says he avoided her all this time, but now the first act is over he doesn't need to. He says he guesses her probation is over. She gets startled, and hides, and says yeah while standing behind a tree. Then she covers her eyes saying she has stuff to do at the Ophilis Hall, so bye. Ed is completely lost by the situation, and he says he should get to work, saying that it is finally time for him to start making a real shelter. Day 1, he chose the location to build the hut, and he picked a wide area under the shade. 3 days in he's begun to gather wood, and due to being proficient with wind blade he's become smooth with it. Day 6, he paused gathering wood since the semester results were out. He got his scores, and Yannicka continued to run away from him. Clara and Anis are annoyed by Ed, and he says he plans to avoid them. 18 days in the lumber work is mostly complete, and he wonders if anyone has become this proficient at wind blade. 20 days in vacation finally started, so he can lay out the framework for his hut. And he checked the trap he laid out for Lucy, finding her slumped out as usual. Day 27 Belle Maya came to give him some herbs and mushrooms, and asked how things with Yannicka are going. When he told her she seems to hate him, she was confused. Day 30 it collapsed when he tried to start the roofing, and he realized he has to do more to make it stable. He ran into Yannicka's group at the bakery, and Clara and Anis got pissed again. Day 36 came to help him, and while they hammers the roof he said Taylor is a great guy like Ed said, and he asks Ed if they'll do this other side, but he says no. It's for the chimney. He makes one more notch on the tree to count the days, and drops his knife. As day 45 he steps into the hut, and sits down inside of it. Neither the flooring or walls are attached, and there's no furniture. It's just a hut made out of crude logs, but there are outer walls and a ceiling, and if he shuts the doors bugs can't crawl in. He looks very relaxed, and a window appears showing it's a crafting difficulty of 4 out of 5 stars, increasing his proficiency. He sits inside, and relaxes while listening to the forest. He finally has a home now. We see Yannicka peering over from a tree, and she looks like she's hyping herself up. Ed says he's done with the walls, flooring and fireplace. He'd like to put up a fence next, a storage for the firewood and a few others would be good too. Then a loud bang can be heard from the roof. He tells Lucy this isn't a nap tower, then he hears Yannicka. He looks over, to see her waving, and he asks what she's doing out here. She laughs, and starts to flash back a conversation she was having with Belle Maya, who says that she was surprised by what she found at Ed's, and Yannicka asks if she means the hut. Belle asks how she knew, and Yannicka says she saw it while passing by. She says that it was remarkable, and it made her surprised by how well built it was. She didn't know he had talent making such things. Belle says she wants to see what the inside looks like, and see if it's sturdy. Yannicka says she didn't think she'd also be curious too. Belle says of course, she's human, it's only natural to be curious about things like this. She's just letting Yannicka know it's normal, so she calms down, but she is totally in love. Yannicka starts repeating what Belle said to her, and Ed is a little lost but says sure. She says it's a great hut. He asks if the spirits didn't tell her that he recently built it. She nervously says they told her a little. She says it's just stuff about the hut, but recalls them telling her about his body, and they described it in great detail. As it was part of her daily report after all, she tells him that she doesn't know much. He asks if she wants to take a look inside, saying it's just a log hut, but she's welcome. She looks excited, then nods her head saying yeah. She starts to pog out of her gourd, saying it's crazy he did it alone. It cuts to later, and he's made a campfire. Yannicka says she owes everyone a lot, both Fina and Lortel, and some of her friends offered to let her borrow money. Ed listens intently, saying if she can't pay them back then don't. Saying you gotta pay what you owe. She says she didn't think of that, he thinks that's just like her. She doesn't understand that the incident happened because the weight from others was pressuring her to do her best. With her being temporarily moved to the Dex Hall, she'll have 8 other women in her room. But it won't fix her issue, as it's a cycle she'll have to stop herself. Ed tells her if she ever wants to be alone, she's always welcome, and that he doesn't mind her being here. She goes to say something, but smiles instead, saying that makes her really happy. She says she hopes if he ever feels overwhelmed too, he'll come to her. Because when that happens, she'll help him at all costs. He smiles and looks at her, then says if it's being overwhelmed. The second semester is starting soon, which means Act 2 should be starting. We see a small grimoire, and Lortel standing before it. She says that it smells of money. Back to Ed, he thanks Yannicka, but tells her it probably won't happen, at least not to him. Since it'll be Taylor having the hard time instead. He says he's cheering for him. Episode 2 is about the Awfulest Hall, and that the students of this hall are guaranteed noble-like lives here. They get seating choices in class, maids, special meals. This is where the problem starts. Due to heavy rain, and only the awfulest students being given carriages and boats to return to school, they were also given the perk of relaxing for a few days. Whereas the Dex Hall students weren't given any of these things, and feared deduction of points, so they eventually gathered in front of the Awfulest Hall. And all of this played out all within Lortel's plan. She got in touch with the rep of the Dex Hall students, and he only cared about screwing over the academy. The other students were also unhappy with the situation, and all they needed was a justification. Willain was good at manipulating others, pulled the trigger for them. They mailed in a letter showing the discriminatory treatment, and offered a proposal suggesting a proactive change in the deadline on returning to school. The Awfulest head maid and some of the academy administration were already on Lortel's side. So they'll support the proposal. But at this point it was irrelevant whether it was accepted or not. The students planned to show that they weren't tolerating it anymore. They planned to amplify the controversy by lighting the Awfulest Hall on fire. It's full of art pieces and furniture made by artisans. This way it would be hurting the academy's finances, since they are still busy with the Glasgow repairs too. It granted the Elt Merchant Association a huge advantage. The sealed grimoire that was shown earlier is like the heart of Sylvania. We hear Lortel asking when the rain will end, as she's looking out the window. She says there's not a single ray of light in the sky, and it reminds her of the slums as a child. She can't help but feel relieved. She looks out the window with resolve, and says the desk behind her is proof she's alive, never showing the slightest bit of sincerity and always betraying or suspecting others, while trying to survive desperately, while struggling to survive. This is what she's turned into. Which has made her always want to look for her own kind, even in Sylvania where people shine brightly, There are people among them who would acknowledge the disgusting life of a gutter rat. She looks out the window saying how lonely. Lortel was always dark in the game, and the players called her the hidden villain due to how she acted. We hear the students outside, chanting saying they can't take the inequality. Ed says in the original storyline, the main characters stop the Dex Hall students, and there are middle bosses on each of the 5 floors to stop the main characters. The middle boss of the first floor, Tote the decoy mocked Taylor by calling him a loser, but got his ass beat. His role is to overpower the rookie maid protecting the first floor. He kicks the door open, and the students outside begin to charge inside. Once the students get through the first floor, the Act 2 phase boss Tote plays a certain role, the role of stopping the main character. Willain says he must be the one Lortel bought off. Ed says originally this role was Tote's, but he reveals that it's him. Ed says he became the middle boss of Act 2, and to explain this he's gotta rewind to 2 days ago. We see the sky above the forest, and Ed is tracking footprints. He says he has 0 talent when it comes to combat skills. He's been using a bow anytime he hunts, yet his proficiency is barely increasing. He spots something when he's hunting the deer, and we see Belle Maya walking behind it. Then Jix runs in saying hello, and Claire appears behind Ed. He says he can't stop getting visitors. Among them are of course some regulars, one being Lucy who comes here to sleep. She's surprised by the new back door he added, and asks about a chimney but he shoos her away. She asks why he doesn't have a glass window, then says she won't break it. Then we hear Yannicka, and he says he's happy when she stops by. She says she brought eggs, and Belle said he'd like them. She also helps him with his laundry, saying she used to do this at the farm. He was very gracious that she'd come by. He tells her she's the best, asking how she knows so much. She instantly turns away, and he wonders what he did wrong. Then she turns back around, asking how often Lucy comes by. And finally, the other visitor is someone unexpected. It's Lortel. She says she needs his help, and since he knows she's the hidden villain of this act, and that she's trying to get people he doesn't want to get tangled into this. He walks past her, and she says that she wasn't going to ask this at first either, but Tote is passed out. Ed asks her what happened, wondering why he fainted. Since it's not going as per the story, originally he'd pick a fight with Taylor. But it turns out he ended up calling Ed trash in front of Taylor, and he got punched in the face, but by Zix, instead of Taylor. Alvy said she's never seen Zix so angry either. Lortel says she doesn't have anything hard from him, and he just needs to take the key from Alice, behind her, then enter the hall with it. And when the Dex Hall students come outside, he needs to let them in. Ed says anyone can do this, so why him? She tells him that there's no guarantee they'd not rat her out. So she can't just trust anyone to do it. She says she knows Ed was kicked out of the hall, and asks if he wants to screw the academy over. He says nah, not really. But if she listens to his conditions it might change. She says okay, and offers 20 gold, and he says bet, then shakes her hand. One day until the incident, we see Ed reading by his fire, and explains the story a bit more. Lortel succeeds with this all, and forms a merchantry inside the academy, which ends up rivaling Fenia's association. It turns into an idealist versus realist conflict, and whoever Taylor picks ends up winning. So he just needs to be a spectator, then join the group that'll win, since he has to survive too. We then hear Yannicka's voice, saying she needs to go back to the dorms, and she thought the rain would stop. She says it's interesting, to her this place is like a camping trip. But he has to stay here at all times. He tells her it's something that gets better with time. She says she'll have to throw a lot of her stuff away, since the Dex Hall is smaller than she thought. Speaking of which, if he needs anything then tell her, since there should be things he needs. She has extra pillows, cushions and other stuff too. And she has a lot of daily necessities, and she doesn't want to throw all of it away, saying it'd be a waste, and she can't bring it all. He says he'd love that. She says when the semester starts she'll start bringing some stuff. Then she asks again how often Lucy just stands on the roof and stares. He says sometimes. But explains to us that her power doesn't come free of cost from her. She lived her life running away, using laziness as an excuse. She'd been turning her eyes away from her fate for so many years, but no matter what she's thinking. The rain always makes her reflect on her past. He tells Yannicka she's just like this when it rains. He usually just ignores it. Yannicka says that he's indifferent towards Lucy. That's good. He says bathe away. Then thinks about how tomorrow the protection runes on the Awfulest Hall will lock the students in their rooms, but Yannicka can break them out easily. So he tells her he has a favor to ask. He asks if tomorrow at around 9 could she come to the rose garden in front of the office hall. She starts to blush, and he says he'll tell her the reason tomorrow. He can't tell her now since he doesn't know how to explain it, but he should get here there just in case something were to happen. She stands up saying okay, and runs away all flushed saying she'll be going now. He sighs, saying around the start of the semester the rain should stop, and he can finally enjoy the sunny sky that day. He watches the fire and the rain, saying this long vacation will be ending now too. Now it's the day of the incident at 9, we hear Zix saying his execution is off, he's training, and says that he didn't expect Elka to be so angry. He lands on his feet, and looks deep in thought, but then he spots something out the window, it's someone in a raincoat running. It's none other than Ed. He asks about the other maids and most of them are in the meeting room to discuss something important. The maid also tells Ed she's prepared what he asked for in advance, we see a bucket of oil or something, and he says he'll keep it here. He stands before the steps, saying the preparation is all ready. We hear chanting, as it shows the Dex Hall students outside the main door. Ed says that it's about time for it to begin. The students keep chanting that they can't stand this treatment anymore. Willain of course is leading them, saying to answer to their pleas. The students run to the door, but it opens as of course Ed's kicked it open, and now we're finally caught up to where he was before he explained it. We see the maid twitching with the sack over her head, and Ed tells Willain in a monotone voice, much like my own. That he agrees with his words. Willain begins to shake, and says he's a fool for judging Ed on rumors. Ed quickly shoves him saying he should go upstairs, and that he's the one who pulled all of this off. He knows that Willain will be taking the blame for all of this, saying he hopes he toughens up. Then the man begins to run away, and he says there's no point in stopping her. Since the chief maid Alice who controls the protection runes is in Lortel's pockets. And the protection runes which are meant to protect the students, end up detaining them. Everything is going just as the original story. Then we hear Lortel saying that was flashier than she expected, but she says it's as expected and it's great that she left it to him. Lortel says her socks are wet, and this is why she hates rainy days. Then she says the academy employees will repress the Dex students in no time, so they need to finish before then. He tells her to do her best, she says she knows it's out of the blue. But has he ever killed anyone before? He waits a second, then says no he hasn't. She laughs, saying neither has she. But she's done other crimes since she needed to survive. She's crushed others' lives, and to avoid being betrayed she's backstabbed others. Using nothing but their money as an excuse, and it's how she ended up with the nickname of Golden Daughter. She knows more than anyone else, she doesn't deserve sympathy. So she ends up looking for it from others. She calls out to him, asking if he could ever sympathize with someone like her. As the rain echoes outside, he stares at her. Then says no, she has to take responsibility for her decisions. She doesn't say anything, and smirks saying she said something quite unlike herself. Then fakes a smile, saying she'll go do what she's here for. She walks away, and Ed sighs then sits down, and says now that the plan is going forward. The story should keep going as normal, the command of the runes will be given to Willain, who will go berserk due to the spells, and he'll become a boss. The scenario is about defeating him, so he just needs to wait for Taylor's group. He'll do an average job, then lose and let them go handle the rest. He'll take a few hits, but that's bound to happen. At the Rose Garden, we hear Yannicka wondering why there's a horse and carriage here. Saying it must be someone important, she wonders if it'll be okay to be here. But she says Ed left her a note, saying he'd be late. She starts to blush, wondering if he's preparing something special. The horse carriage wasn't important to her anymore. For the last 3 nights she's been thinking about this, to the point she can't sleep. She kept up to what Ed was doing through Marilda. She learned it wasn't just Lucy at camp, but about Alice and Lortel too, and the rest. Learning there were other women there, made it heartbreaking for her. But it just made her decide to wait no matter how long it took. She starts to wonder if her hairpin should have been a different one, and she thinks about it. Saying she could hurry back and it should be okay. She decides to do it, and runs back to the office hall. Then we see Taylor asking if this is the right choice. Alvira says she refuses to lose the herbs in her room, and if she waits they'll lose their properties. Taylor tells Alia to talk sense into her, but she says that surely Alvira can defend herself. Taylor says he's not worried about her, but those around her. He tells her to stop, and she says she's going to her room. And if anyone gets in her way she'll force her way past them. She kicks the door open, and is surprised to see Ed sitting in front of the steps, with the place being trashed. Taylor calls out to Ed, and asks why he is here. Elvira looks like she knows, and starts to turn into Sherlock Holmes, observing all of the footsteps and the rummaged furniture. She says it's interesting, she didn't expect this, and asks if he's here to stop them. Ed says he's sorry, but he cannot allow them to go in there. Elvira laughs, saying this is fun, asking if he's sure he can stop her. She's heard from Zix that his magic proficiency is high, but he's just a rookie who can only use basic spells. They've got a swordsman and a mage on their side, along with the best alchemist of the freshmen. Taylor asks him why he's doing this, saying to tell him about it. Ed stays silent, and Taylor dashes forward saying he has no choice, but to force him to speak up. Ed throws his chair at Taylor, who cuts through it with ease. Elvira says it looks like a basic magic spell that Ed's preparing, and he'll definitely focus Taylor, since he wants to avoid close range. But she watches, as Ed doesn't do that at all, and instead shoots his wind blade towards the chandelier on the ceiling, cutting the chain, causing it to fall directly towards Taylor. Taylor sees it, but barely manages to escape from it. The students upstairs start to panic, and Clabius is hella scared, wondering what's going on. Taylor asks Alia if she's okay. She says she only fell out of shock. He asks Elvira, and she says not to worry about her, but another wind blade flies at her, and cuts the hair off her shoulder, along with her bag strap, causing it to fall to the floor. She says he's serious about this, and something must be going on upstairs. She realizes he isn't where he was standing, and looks to her side, towards her potions, then starts to reach for them. Ed casts ignition, and lights up specific areas on the floor. Elvira says this was set up meticulously, and this is not good. She says Zix should have mentioned this, as Ed doesn't only have high magic proficiency. Elvira says being an alchemist has a huge flaw, which is that without relying on tools and potions their combat power is close to zero. Most of them carry a ring or necklace to combat that, but she thought too arrogantly to do that. And she wonders if Ed had planned all of this out from the start. He made the chandelier drop, and used the opening to cast wind blade to cut her bag. Then blocked her from it. She then changes her mind, saying nah. After all, he's just the measly Ed who everyone knows. She pulls out a bead from her breast pocket, then throws it, summoning a spirit of sorts. She says she'll apply a fire-resistant formula to it, and amplify its strength. I think she confused fire resistance with a trenbolone sandwich. The cute bunny grows in size. And Alia starts to think about how to put the fire out. She starts to prepare a water spell, but wind blades start to fly from Ed, and she sees them and gets scared, but Taylor quickly jumps in, slicing them all away, telling Alia to lock in. She starts to panic, and Taylor explains that while she's confident in theory, her combat ability is low. And with Ed attacking her, it forces them both to stay here. Elvira asks Taylor if he can take him down if he can get close, then tells him to not miss the chance. She sends out Roid Bunny, it runs at Ed, then leaps toward him. Taylor says he'll try his best. Elvira says good, then uses her raincoat to cover herself, as she dives through the fire toward her bag. She picks her potions up, saying she missed them. Ed avoids the swing, then starts to cast Wind Blade. He aims it directly towards Elvira, then fires it off at her. She says he seems well prepared, and uses Release Magic onto her potion and throws it at the Wind Blade. She says he's late, and the potion explodes. She explains how it's a chemical reagent prepared by dicing up specific herbs, and it works by controlling the release of magic. The fire surrounds the room, and we see the Roid Bunny has a blade stabbed through its chest, and its corpse falls to the floor, and Elvira says surely he knows what this means for a mage who can't use magic. She says trying to act strong isn't enough, and tells Taylor this is his chance. He charges in, but sees Ed running away. Ed grabs onto a shelf, then pushes it over. Then kicks the bucket of oil over, into small remnants of the fire, and creates a massive fire in front of Taylor. Elvira asks if Ed is crazy, saying if there's a fire here people will die. Taylor says he'll slash it away with his elemental slash, and the chemical reagent shouldn't last for long. He says regardless, he is going to put an end to this. Elvira tries to tell him to wait. She notices the window is open to let the smoke escape, and that the flammable furniture is off on the side. She wonders if Ed thought this far ahead, while Taylor slices through the fire. Ed readies his bow. Elvira realizes it's all part of his plan, but it's too late. Ed begins to draw the bow back, and as Taylor rushes in close to him, he decides he'll deflect the shot, but then he watches, as the arrow is released, and it flies past his head directly at Alia. As it gets close, Alia tries to cast something, but begins to panic and closes her eyes. but the arrow does get blocked, but by Elvira, who says that was close. We see her panting, showing she barely made it. The tool is called a claw hand, that pulls any small object within her vision to her. She wonders what's the deal with the arrow, because she spots that the arrowhead has been covered in cloth. She tells Taylor to be careful, saying he has another trick up his sleeve, but it's too late. Taylor attacks at him, Ed blocks it with his bow, and a noise begins to go off in the hall. He says it's time, as the second boss of this episode, Clabias, has escaped. Ed sighs, saying finally. Then takes the hit from Taylor, which sends him flying. Elvira is confused, asking what the hell his deal was. Taylor asks him if he's insane, asking why he went so far. Elvira says she feels icky, like he played them the entire fight. If he wanted to overpower them, he wouldn't have shown himself at all, yet he stood there to stop them all. Even during the fight, he wasn't lax for a moment. Something is strange. Ed asks Taylor if he's done now. Then lets out a sigh and plops to the floor, saying to stop yapping and go up. Taylor asks why he stopped them. As the rain continues, Elvira asks why he let them win. Alia and Taylor asks what she means. Elvira tells Ed she doesn't plan on leaving this place without knowing why he let them win. Ed stares at her, and she looks angry. The front door opens again, and we see Yannicka enter, and she brings in the rain with her. She sees Ed, who she's been waiting for, all beaten up and bloodied with people with him. Yannicka then asks them all what the hell is going on here. Yannicka starts to think about how this must have all been planned so she wouldn't be swept into it, and that's why he wanted to meet here in the rose garden. She takes her headpiece off, then asks them again what they are doing. Taylor says thank God she didn't get caught into this, and some students took over the awfulest hall. But Ed stopped them from going upstairs, so there's something else to it. Elvira tells him to wake up, saying Yannicka is an enemy. Yannicka says to be honest with them, she really doesn't care what they are doing here, and begins to release her aura. Ed stands up, calling out to her. She smirks, saying it's okay. Elvira drops her potion out of panic, and Yannicka begins to summon her spirits to help her take them down. She tells Ed to just wait 1 minute, as that's all it'll take. Elvira recognizes that they are intermediate grade spirits. She tells Taylor they need to leave, since they can't beat her, especially seeing as how they struggled against Ed. Now they would be up against the top student of the second years. Yannicka launches her spirits at them, and tells Taylor to wake up already. He grits his teeth, saying she isn't wrong, but he readies his blade anyways. Saying they can't have her unable to use her herbs, right? The spirits start to engage with Taylor, but Ed says damn it man, just listen, and yoinks him backwards, saying to leave when he says to. He tells Taylor to listen closely, and that he'll deal with Yannicka, so just go to the second floor like he wanted to. Alia asks why he stopped them before, if he's letting them go now. He says he changed his mind, now go. Elvira laughs and asks how the hell he plans to stop the spirits, when he's all worn out. He smacks her head, saying to focus on getting her herbs, and apologizes about her bag. She asks why he keeps ordering them around, but says they'll listen this time. Then they run off, leaving Ed to handle the spirits. Yannicka seems to be zoned out, but comes to when she spots Ed right in front of her. He walks towards her, and she says not to push too hard and she'll deal with them. He raises his hand, and says that he's seriously fine. And puts it on her shoulder, asking her to calm down. She instantly calms down, and begins to blush. Her face turns red and she says his hands are on her shoulders. He tells her to send the spirits away, he can barely stand. She does so, and apologizes, saying she's an idiot. The spirits fade out, and glass falls to the floor. Elvira and the gang are surprised he stopped her. And he waves to them, saying hopefully they go up quickly. He starts to pass out, and falls straight to the floor. Yannicka screams, then a bit later. We see her asking why he keeps getting hurt, and she told him she'd help. He says this wasn't the situation for it, and she says regardless, they were too excessive. But she'll get angry next time they meet. She tells him to stop getting hurt, and to promise her. He says okay, then thanks her for worrying. He stands back up, saying the plans are slightly strayed, but he did his job. Now he can focus on camp. Yannicka then tells him about the carriage she saw in the rose garden. She couldn't see clearly, but she did see a golden crown. Ed makes a serious face, saying that's a symbol for the leader of the Elk Merchant Association. Lortel's adoptive father, and the one who killed her actual father, the fake boss who disappears after losing to Lortel. The Golden King Elt. Him being here means something is going on, outside the scope of his knowledge. As the rain continues to pour, we see high up in the awfulest hall, Lortel looking out of a window, asking Alice if she knows why she was turned down. She says Alice knows who she's talking about. She asks her if she means Ed. She says yes, and Alice says she didn't know Ed was her type. Lortel says that's not what she meant and she had the same feeling from him as she does from her. And she tells her about how she asked Ed about if he'd sympathize with her, and how he instantly said no. She says she guesses people like them get used to hearing this all their life. Alice was the chief maid, and has been working here for 20 years. She started from nothing as an apprentice maid at 15. But showed her competency rising to become manager. This is where most of Lortel's investment went, and she tried to make Alice less uptight. And it burned a hole through her pocket, but she was genuinely glad to have Alice by her side. Since she found one of her own kind, someone who'd abandon their rigid life view, just for some gold. Only by meeting those she deems like herself would she break through from her loneliness. She tells Alice that Willain will take the 4th floor, and if they hand him the Berserk defense magic, they'll destroy the awfulest hall without even knowing it. She smiles toward Alice, and says it's all going to plan, so she'll go to the storage room. And she has to pretend to be a student not knowing about anything happening. Alice sighs. And begins to draw her blade, saying she wants to inform her now. She puts it to her neck, saying she isn't exactly her kind. As Alice has never loved someone, it jumps back to Taylor tying up Clabias, as they overpowered him. Making them join their party. Then they stopped Kelly the maid with ease, as she wasn't a match without her twin sister. They didn't question why her sister wasn't there and smoothly continued onward. As the only difficulty was the 1st floor boss. They hear students screaming, and they say run as Willain floats down the hallway saying he needs someone to help him. Ed explains how the magic was in place to defend the school, but with Willain piloting it's like giving a child a gun. Taylor blocks the magic, and the entire hall begins to shake. Some students start to panic, wondering what's going on. Saying it's going to collapse, they start shouting asking where the maids are. And that they need to quickly get out. They use magic to burst through the windows, and the whole situation was turning into a catastrophe. Taylor asks if she has more of her reagent. Alvira says it won't work as it's a rune. And that this is the true answer. She pulls out a different reagent, saying it'll block all basic magic here inside the corridor. She picks up Clabias by his collar, then tells him to go help Taylor knock Willain out. Willain begins to cast some spells, but Taylor and Clabias swiftly avoid all of the attacks, and get close to Willain, who we can see is crying, and he says finally as an explosion erupts, all throughout the top floor of the hall. We see Ed watching by Elt's carriage. Yannicka asks what his plan is, saying he'll open his wounds. He says he's fine, then she asks why he's going so far. He sighs, and he looks at the carriage saying it's quite plain, and that it's only because the outside can't hold up to who is hiding inside of it. As normally he'd be escorted by a grand fleet of a dozen carriages, but him moving like this shows he's trying to be secretive. He shouldn't be here right now, so why the hell is he here? The carriage should have been here a while, so why is he only now getting out? Ed sees a familiar face, saying that's Shenny, one of the maids that Alice raised. She was originally the 3rd floor boss, she was bought off by Lortel. But yet she's here with Elt, and there's no way Shenny would betray Alice. Then he realizes that it must be the other way, and that Alice is on Elt's side. The only possible future now, is that Lortel will die. But she's a main character in the rest of the game, so he can't allow this. He had to play Toad's part, yet now he has to play Lortel's role as well. This is nuts. He tells Yannicka that he has a favor to ask, and he can't handle it on his own. He tries to think how to explain, but she instantly says okay, asking what she needs to do. We learn the letter to Elt was from Alice, and mentions how Lortel was going to betray him. She knows Elt killed her biological parents, and that the whole negotiations on purchasing the grimoire was to bring Elt here personally. So she could strike him down in surprise, so he can't react. And now she is holding on to the evidence to prove what Lortel is conspiring to do. But it's not for free, since Lortel gave her a lot of gold. Elt would have to give more, to get here to betray her. She says she's losing sight, and already lost most of her hearing. So this'll be her last year as head maid. And depending on what choice Alice makes, things get better or worse. She says she's attached the list of names to the institutions she's been secretly managing all this time. And the amount of gold delivered to these institutions will determine her actions. So she trusts him to make the correct judgment. She tells Lortel not to move, and Elt will be here soon. She says she didn't expect Lortel to act like this, saying she thought she'd be more level-headed. And she's sorry that she's doing this, but she doesn't see Lortel and Elt as very different people. Though the same can be said for her too. An explosion occurs beside them both, and Alvira says there's no way Willain could have gotten close to the defensive magic alone, then in Scooby-Doo fashion points out that Alice must be the true mastermind, and that she's even holding a hostage. Lortel ducks while Alice is surprised, and the gang ask her if she is okay. Lortel says she has to quickly tell them that Alice planned all of this. Alvira is surprised by something, and asks what's wrong with Lortel's face. Lortel wonders what expression she is making, and runs down the stairs away from them. She says Elt is coming, and he doesn't even trust his own henchman, so he came personally. The plan was nearly complete to overthrow him, but since Elt is here she just needs to contact headquarters, then find somewhere to hide. She says as long as she isn't caught it'll be okay, then she slowly stops running. And says nobody understands her, she expected betrayal since she's gone through it countless times. She puts her hand on the wall. And we see that she's crying, and she says this doesn't suit her at all. She gets back to running, saying she must do what she can. She has to get to her room before Elt does. Since if she can send the carrier pigeon it'll be fine. At the same time, on the first floor we see Elt makes his way into the hall. He asks someone if they are a student, saying they should evacuate. We hear Ed saying due to the risk of collapse, nobody is allowed to enter. And he won't let anyone through until the faculty and staff arrive. Elt asks if this was under the academy's orders. He says no, and he's acting on his own. He says only 3 people are aware of the story's flow. Lortel who wants to oust Elt for revenge, then Elt who plans to stop Lortel's plans, and then Alice who is using both of them to get gold. He's not sure why she betrayed Lortel. But he won't have to go stop her personally, as Taylor's party will. He'll let them take care of her. He trusts them because he confirmed their abilities when he fought them right here. So he has to handle this situation here himself. Ed says then says he can't believe it, that Elt Kecklin is here. He says he's sure there's a reason he's here, but how about talking with the academy first? Elt says he sees now, that Ed must be on Lortel's side in this. It jumps to 10 minutes ago, we see a wall being broken down, and Ed says it's a mess outside. Then asks Zix why he is still inside his room. He says there's no point in not training, it's not like the building collapsing will kill him. Then he asks why they broke the wall, saying it's gonna be cold when he sleeps. How the hell is he a mage? Zix says this is their first time actually talking, as they didn't get a good chance to speak last time. She looks sad about the incident, and Ed tells her it's fine. Then Zix asks if they are dating. Yannicka freaks out, and says no. He looks over at Ed, and asks if it bothered him. He says nah, it's Zix who asked it. Zix bows, apologizing for that. Then asks them why they destroyed the wall. Ed says he has a favor, and he'll repay him later. Back to Ed talking to Elt, he repeats the thing about him being on Lortel's side like before the flashback, and he asks Ed if he fell for her dull appearance. He says that she'll always backstab someone, and he knows since he's raised her, and he'll pay Ed double the gold she's offering, if he steps out of the way. Ed says thanks for the offer, but he wasn't promised any gold coins. So he can't double it and give it to the next person. Elt says he sees, and words surely won't be enough to convince him. He tells his men to dispose of him, and they start to chase after Ed. Elt asks if they are going to let him escape, then the henchmen are hit by an attack from the side. We see it was Zix, and he tells Ed he's got it. Ed says he'll be back after checking the situation out, and he'll repay him later. Yannicka and Zix get ready to stop Elt's men, and Elt recognizes they are strong, telling his men to use everything they've got. The henchmen then fly towards the 2 of them. It goes back to Ed who is running, saying he has to get to Lortel, and ask her about this. Then he realizes she's right behind him. Then he asks her if she couldn't escape. He says they can go through the back door, asking if she can run. Lortel says there's always a reason for goodwill and trust. Even Shara the receptionist for the Elt group acts flirty with her, because he wants to get information out of her. Kaden, another employee, acts lively in front of her, because she tell him information. The reason her pet bird clings to her is because she gives it the highest quality of feed. All goodwill comes with a reason, at least to Lortel. Ed says they definitely don't have the time to get into detail, then says Alice betrayed her right. She thinks to herself that it's a dumb mistake, and her fault. She starts to talk about how Yannicka is always receiving love and goodwill from others, but she's not like her. And that day she was talking to Ed by the campfire, she saw the heated look she was giving Ed, seeing her without greed. Made her think that she'd be able to have a relationship without greed. So she told Alice her plans, but we know how that ended. Even after seeing her like that, she starts to reflect, saying it's her fault and she should have known better. She bought off 5 people to occupy this hall, which are all of the mid-bosses, Ed included. Alice, and the other maids ended up under Elt's command. Willain also wanted to take his side. So the same must go for Ed too. She stops moving, and apologizes to him. She says she can't guarantee the gold anymore as he can see she's in a bad situation. He says he didn't ask, and they don't have time for this. So keep running, as if she gets caught in her future, or plans will mean nothing. She is at a loss for words, saying there's always a reason for goodwill and trust, and if you don't see the reason then don't trust them. That's how it usually is, at least. She starts to tell him all about the plans her father made. And that after the armor price fell, they bought all of the armor as a monopoly. Ed says so it's just manipulative trading, and she doesn't have to explain in length. She says exactly, and Elt needed the money for the grimoire. And he sent her here to steal it. He says he gets it and she doesn't need to explain anymore, and he explains how it'd be 3 groups artificially trading with one another, to manipulate the price, and forces people to develop FOMO. Which makes the people with the monopoly filthy rich. Detective Conan Guy returns, as Ed explains it's a system built on trust. And that Elt would be at a huge loss if it backfired, so Lortel bought the other merchants for many years, and only when Elt is absent from the headquarters can she get the merchants to transfer the right of sale. He explains this to her while they run, and she is surprised by this. He says there's only one thing left for her to do, and they just need to get the message out. She tells him about the pigeon in her room, that is in a direct line of communication with her forces in the headquarter. Ed says that's their win con then. She says her dad is expecting that too, and she's sure he's planning to capture her tonight. Ed waits a second, then tells her to listen carefully. And from this point onward she needs to stay hidden so nobody can see her. If he was Elt he'd have people at the bridges that lead to the Arkan Mountains. They'd definitely track them down, so talk to the horsemen in the quarters to send an empty carriage to the Arkan Mountains. And to leave it in a spot to run away from here, so they'll believe she's on the outskirts of the Arkan Mountains. She asks where she'll be staying. He tells her at his hut in the forest. And he'll send the pigeon in her room off, and he wonders if they'll understand a simple sell now letter. She says yes. He realizes something, then grabs onto her and pushes her against the wall, saying that someone is at the back door. He'll take care of that and run to her room. When he finishes, she should run to the quarters. She starts to have an internal debate. He asks if she's okay, saying she's acting strange. She says she's got it, then asks him why he's helping her so much. He's lost for words, then starts to wonder how to reply. He says there's no reason, he just felt like it and walks out, closing the door behind him. We start to hear a thumping sound, getting louder and louder. She falls to the floor, and says that it's so loud. She wonders if it's the fight between Alice and Taylor's group, then wonders if it's from something on the first floor. She grips at her chest, saying she can't believe this, and that the loud thumping sound is her own heartbeat. It jumps to outside, and we hear Shenny saying she didn't expect it to be Ed, and this is quite the surprise. He says for just an obstacle, this feels hella lame for the final showdown. He starts to think about how Alice must have regained control of the protection runes. Not only is she an expert with the sword, who can hold her own, she's also an intermediate magic user. But despite all of that, she won't be able to defeat Taylor at all. Since he is the main character, of course. As the battle upstairs echoes to outside, Shenny's blade is still being pointed directly towards Ed. He says that he's almost out of mana, and he's got 2 or 3 spells left in him. Shenny dashes forward. Then makes a zigzag pattern towards Ed. She slashes at him, but he avoids the attack from her. She is surprised, but he knew she'd aim for his leg. He steps on her blade, and she pulls up her skirt, to reveal smaller knives. She goes to grab one, but he stops her and throws her hidden knife belt away. She looks panicked. Then her eyes glow purple, as once a day she and her sister can share their skills with one another. She uses low-level telekinesis magic on the knives and sends them directly towards Ed. He avoids some, but 2 of them stab into him. Shenny grins thinking she's won, but the smirk quickly fades as she sees that Ed is unfazed. By this, he pulls the knife out, saying their borrowed abilities aren't refined. Then throws both the knives to the floor. He pushes her down too, and kicks her rapier away, saying it's over now. She screams, and she says she can't disappoint Alice, and to get out of her way. He tells her that Alice will lose. She asks what he'd know about her, saying she's endured so much pain, and asks what he'd know about any of this. We see her launching magic towards Taylor's group, and Shenny says she's saved many orphans, she is one of them. Ed says the game never went deep into her backstory, but we see Taylor go Ultra Instinct, cutting through her magic like it was butter. He flies towards her for the deciding blow. As it gets closer to her, her face glows. Then an explosion occurs upstairs, and he says well, he doesn't care about any of this. Shenny says she won't forgive him, asking how he could side with Lortel. She passes out, and a fire is seen from upstairs. Ed says sadly he doesn't know the extra stories, and there's no point since there's too many stories that won't come to light. Another explosion occurs. He begins to drag Shenny, and props her against the wall inside, then continues running away. He says his goal hasn't changed, as he plans to fully survive. Due to incapacitating Shenny, he unlocks a pain endurance skill. He says he can't believe he's earned this here. Then breaks a window with a rock, then hops through it. He looks around at the room saying that this room definitely suits Lortel. He goes to the carrier pigeon, and writes to them that Elt is here, so sell everything as per the plan. The carrier pigeon flies off towards the moon, and back outside we see blood dripping, as Ed is huffing and bleeding profusely. He says the cuts will surely heal, and if it wasn't for Zix or Yannicka, then Lortel would have been captured by Elt. By now the carriage she hired should be speeding out of the mountains by now. Elt has no choice but to fall for the bait. Even if he catches the coachman, and learns Lortel never left, it would be too late. And if it went as planned, Lortel should be waiting at his hut. He sees her, and says greeting him is quite nice of her. He then is surprised, as she pulls out a knife and he says he was too complacent, since it's none other than the golden daughter in front of him. She knows now Ed is a variable that cannot be bought with money. So if she kills him here it'll be a success. And that she's the secret mastermind behind everything of course. He says he has to use his brain if he wants to survive, but his body won't move. As she gets closer, she raises the sword and he thinks it's over for him, but she begins to cut her robe and use the fabric to bandage him up, asking why he had to get so hurt. Then helps him back to the hut, saying it stopped raining so she built a bonfire, and they should spend this time and warm themselves up, together. He says she really did stick to the plan. She says of course. She's Lortel after all, and she made the horseman promise her, and he's willing to risk his life. Ed wonders if she's holding his family hostage or something, and she says if it goes well, she'll have the power of the Elt Merchant Association, and the fact that she'll owe him a big one is something surely he finds awesome. He doesn't say anything, and she says that's a boring reaction, but she smiles. Then thanks him, saying she'll never forget this. He tells her to just pay the 20 gold, she says of course, and that she has something to ask. He asks if it's related to Alice, she says it's not that and she wants to know about Yannicka. She says they are pretty close together, and that she respects her as she's always kind to others. Ed asks what her point is, she's hesitant, then says that she is not that nice. Back at the Awfulest Hall, Elt left after getting a report, and Zix wasn't doing that great in fighting the mercenaries, as he was too busy trying to stop Yannicka from just murdering every one of them. As first she had a worried look on her face, but at some point the spirit started going pog crazy, and she needed to be stopped before any casualties occurs. Zix asks her if she's mad about something, and her bird spirit whispers to her, and Yannicka says that she isn't mad in the slightest. It jumps to the next day. Since Ed's uniform was ruined, Zix gave him his. Wylan took the blame for destroying the Awfulest Hall, but Alice hasn't said a single word. Ed says it looks like it all went as planned, but that his body is in pretty bad shape, as he's sore all over. He says with the advanced crafting skill slots open now, acquiring skills take priority, and he's already decided on which skills to master. Spirit formula infusion, and magic engineering, so he can make furniture and weapons. For spirit formula infusion, when he makes a contract, if he makes an artifact that contains it, it'll become instinctive. For magic engineering it's unlocked once you disassemble and assemble an item of a certain level of magic engineering. He doesn't want to waste spirit slots, but he wants to get a lower spirit. To make a contract with, Yannicka appears and says it's cold that the rain stopped. He asks why she isn't going to class, she says she's got a headache and body pain. So she wanted to get fresh air. He asks if she got hurt helping him, she says no. Then she asks him if Lortel is okay. He tells her yeah, she's resting in the cabin. Yannicka angry. Lortel says the whole incident has been fully wrapped up, but there's still work left to do. She laid the groundwork for the negotiation to purchase the grimoire still, but now she has to stay here with an anxious heart. It's frustrating, but she doesn't hate it, because being with Ed makes her heart race. She says being with him makes her feel safe, others find this feeling natural. But for her it's more precious than gold. At no cost does she want to give it away. Especially not to Yannicka. Lortel angry, she says Yannicka already has so much love, she should give her some. She sits down in a chair, saying they'll have to fight for him. But she has the advantage of being forced to live with him for the next 3 days. She says she just needs to bury this cabin in gold, but says maybe showing sympathy is a better idea. She's also short on money. Then she wonders about helping his tuition fees, and imagines herself saying it's not like she's doing it for her sake. Then she headbutts the wall, saying that was so damn cringe, her boyfriend count is 0. She then hears Lucy saying she's in her spot, and sees her walking into the hut yawning. She asks what she's doing here, and Lucy lays down saying this is her nap spot. But Ed quickly carries her off, and puts her into a different shelter he set up. He asks Lortel if she woke her up, saying she can go back to sleep. She says Lucy must come by often, and Ed asks why it matters, she's closer to a natural disaster. Lortel says she has another rival, but she has plenty of time to settle the score. On the morning of day 2, she sticks her head out greeting Ed, but instead sees Yannicka instead. She turns around and sighs, then sees that Lucy is also here too. It jumps to Ed sweating, saying he's finally done. And he's made handmade bricks, and he's unlocked the skill of stonemasonry. He installs the brick fireplace into his hut, and says he's glad it's done. He then starts to make them all food, and Lortel says it's safe to assume that things are going as planned. Ed says yeah, but they can't let their guard down. Lortel says she'll make sure to compensate him, and asks if he'd like to receive goods instead of gold. He thinks about it, saying maybe construction materials, and maybe excess magic engineering equipment. Yannicka starts to feel left out of the conversation, but Ed tells her he has a favor for her. He says he's been trying to learn spirit magic, and he'd like to contract with a lower spirit, asking if she can help. She proudly says that means she's his teacher, and she'll help him form a contract in no time. She gets him to hold a spirit, saying to focus on a connection. Then tells the bird Karis to try talking to him. Karis says something, and Ed says he heard it faintly. Karis tells her that Ed needs to improve his connection so he can hear them better. Karis then tells her to think about Ed's daily routine, saying he has no time, and according to the weekly report meeting they held, he'll need to focus on food and his cabin maintenance, so he has no time to practice. She squishes him out of existence, and awkwardly asks Ed if he heard that. He says something about a weekly meeting. She shamefully looks away from him, and Lortel asks if they are done talking. She says that she'll probably be able to supply Ed with some stuff. He says he'll gladly accept a discount, but she says no and that the amount isn't large, so it'd be a dead asset. She comes up with something, and asks Ed if it would be difficult for him to come to the association every 3 days, saying they could also maybe drink some tea and talk for a bit. Yannicka sees what she's planning, saying why doesn't she give it to him for free? They keep yapping to one another, and Ed just munches away, saying he'll be able to succeed with skill training. We hear Belle's voice as she's arrived at the campsite, saying she apologizes for being here so suddenly. But she has to be the bearer of bad news, and she has a message from Alice. We get a flashback to Belle asking what it is someone wants to discuss. And we see Clara saying not to be shocked as this is top secret. She must absolutely not tell anyone. Then she whispers into her ear, saying that she believes Yannicka likes Ed. Belle thinks about it, wondering if she should try to act surprised. She says that Clara must have been quite worried about her. Clara says she doesn't know how she fell for such a ruffian, but it feels like his reputation is improving. As her friend, she supports her. But that's not all. Yannicka keeps mentioning Lortel by name as well. Just like Ed, she also missed the opening ceremony. And yesterday, they were both absent from the first common class together. Clara says ultimately, relationships are a game of push and pull, remember this class. In that regard, you could say Yannicka doesn't stand a chance. But she doesn't understand it either. It's ridiculous how he pretends not to notice when Yannicka is so obviously into him. Then she wonders if he is kind-hearted or if he is a cunning wolf. Belle says rather than being a wolf or kind-hearted, he's probably in too difficult of a situation to be interested in dating. Clara gets the shivers, saying that there's no way that's true. She can just imagine the grin he has on his face, due to his good luck. Belle thinks about it and then compares Lortel to a thieving cat, Yannicka to a naive kitten, and Lucy to just a cat. The flashback ends, and Ed asks her what's wrong, and she says that just seeing them all is giving her a headache. Lortel then asks her what she wanted to say. Belle bows her head, saying that she has a message for Lortel from the former chief maid Alice. As the bonfire carried away in the night, Yannicka left, and Belle took Lucy away. While it bothers Ed that Lortel's whereabouts were exposed to someone related to the Awfulest Hall. While she was in hiding, she's already been alerted to the victory. We see him inside a uniform. Lortel asks if it's a bit worn out. Ed tells her that it's still decent enough to wear. We see the carrier pigeon bringing their news of victory, so now they can go back to school as usual. Lortel says that the situation has progressed this far. Her father must be making his last stand at the headquarters. Though it's a futile struggle, he certainly won't have time to care about them here in Sylvania. Ed asks if there's any chance that Elt has another trick up his sleeve. She says that he's just as cunning as she is, so there's always a chance of something. The person who aspires to be the next chairman is supporting her, so she has no choice but to trust him. But her biggest concern was Alice. Now that she has been taken care of. Ed asks if this means Alice won't reveal that Lortel was the true mastermind behind all of this. Lortel says that she has no choice as this is already agreed upon. She was planning to side with whoever won between her and her father. The letter that Belle brought her was filled with the list of orphanages Alice sponsored, the maintenance cost, and how to support them. Alice's workload was relentless, and her health deteriorated, but the academy ignored her complaints, eventually leading her to be unable to care for the orphanages. She made a bet with the rest of her life as collateral. Due to how she kept herself with her stoic, unemotional nature, nobody realized what situation she was in. Of course, her subordinates understood exactly what was wrong with her and what worried her. Lortel says that she is only siding with her because her victory looks certain. Making up for the lost trust will be difficult, but based on what she said to her instead of a threat, it seems to be real. Ed glances over at her, saying that in the world of merchants, there is no such thing as sympathy. If you make such a mistake, you will be treated as a fool, and Lortel must know this better than anyone. Lortel says from her point of view, nothing good will come from revealing that she is behind all of this. Then smiles, saying that she will just play along. As there is no such thing as permanent enemies or permanent allies. Ed can tell that she looked relieved. She says that she will be going now. Then asks him to stop by the Merchant Association next week. He says okay and then hands her a torch, saying that it will last for a while. She looks lost in thought, and he asks her what she is thinking about and that she doesn't need to take it. She says that it's just that he is much taller than she thought. He asks her why this is relevant. She says that it does seem rushed, but if she wants to win, she has to make some risky moves. Ed looks down as she gets closer to him. She puts her hand on his tie, saying that the essence of a relationship is about push and pull, check your notes. And that it looks like Ed's tie is all twisted. He says that nobody is even looking at him, so why does his attire bother her that much? She says there is nothing wrong with trying to keep himself looking neat, as they are students. He asks what she means, and then she quickly pulls him in. We see her standing on her tiptoes as she gives him a kiss. Lortel took the first W, her heels touch the ground again, and she touches her lips, saying that the raspberries they ate earlier were delicious. Just thinking about them makes her happy. Ed looks away, telling her to stay within her limits. She says that is upsetting, and that people don't like others pushing or pulling too much. Next time he should pull a little. In a very warm tone, she says that she needs to practice pushing him away too, after all. Then she begins to walk away. As she is walking, he watches as she completely faceplants into one of his traps. He says although he tried to avoid getting involved with the main scenario, this is just how it happens with life. We see that he is flushed from what just happened. He looks up at the stars, saying that they are still beautiful and the moon is bright. Everything is back to usual except for the fact that he is now in the dead middle of the scenario that is going to play out. He says although he has a sense of discomfort from being stuck in the center, his plan of watching the scenarios unfold themselves and not interfering has not changed. He walks inside, saying that he has no greed and that he will get his diploma and get good grades, sticking to his original plan. He says the realization that what felt like an easy plan was actually reckless and quite challenging came not too far in the future. Just like that, summer has finally passed and we are now in fall. We see a leaf falling through the air. We see one of Yannicka's summons. As she is being told about how Lortel kissed Ed, Karis tells her that they can't afford to sit by and if they don't intervene, something bad will happen. She asks what's going on and what they are talking about. Karkan says that they saw it too and youth is amazing, and that Lortel really knows how to play with people's hearts. Yannicka starts to get flushed, asking what they mean and how Ed reacted. Karkan says that from what they saw Ed put up a wall. Even after she kissed him, his facial expression did not change. He was cold to her, and it low-key made him cringe. Which means either A. he is impotent or B. He does not see her as a woman. Yannicka sighs, saying that as a relief. Tarkan tells her that regardless, men aren't as good at being defensive as they are at being proactive. As per someone who has life experience, people like Lortel cling and burn more intensely the more they are rejected. That is not good for Yannicka. Yannicka covers her ears, saying that Tarkan told her that Ed didn't have a reaction. As Tarkan is yapping, the other summons pull him away. The panther been a while, don't know its name, tells her not to listen to Tarkan and that she is the most charming when she is being herself. Tarkan instantly comes back, saying that emphasizing her naive and tearful vibe is also a good idea. The panther suggests that she should have a thrilling and exciting experience with Ed. With a flushed expression, she looks off to the side, saying that feeding each other would be nice. The spirit sighs. Then it jumps to Ed telling Lucy to go ah. He puts a spoonful in her mouth, and her face tells it all as we hear her yak it all up, saying that tastes like straight ass. Ed tells her that he's just testing spices, and she tells him to stop making her a taste testing machine. Ed says that he'll have to delay practicing his cooking skills until he has more ingredients. You can read his life skill details if you would like, but I'm not going to go over every one of them. He explains how key stats influence the proficiency of life skills, and raising just one stat drops the efficiency, so he needs to increase them evenly. The problem is with school just having started up again, he's too busy, and he can only spend about 5 or 6 hours focusing on his survival activities. He might get used to it, but the reason he's worrying about it is because he needs to check the scenario progress as well. Even in his regular life, he keeps an eye over Taylor and the 4 heroines in the academy. Taylor is in the combat faculty, so he seems to be growing well, and his companion Alia is also doing her role of supporting him. Fenia is also having no issues, but it seems that she still might be clashing with Lortel, so he needs to keep an eye on her. He also is keeping an eye on Lortel as well. We see her acting very friendly to him. He says that while her father's dismissal is still uncertain, her plan of getting her hands on the grimoire remains unchanged. The reason that he needs more time as of late is because it's about time he starts checking up on the faculty building. We see him standing outside as he glances up towards the 2nd floor, and he says that the final boss of the 2nd act is in there. We see a familiar face as Glass says that there was a hidden mastermind behind the takeover of the dorms. Of course, he is the 2nd boss of this act. We see that he is talking to a woman named Claire Elfin, and he says that if she thinks it's the case, then it is probably true. He starts to take off his glasses, saying not to miss the important stuff. After the thesis on divine science, he asks her to find it, and he begins to intimidate her. She quickly says that she'll find it by tomorrow morning, and then it cuts back to the Awfulest Hall. Inside Claire's office, we hear Anna saying that she has gathered anything related to the takeover incident, and that Claire slumped out in her chair, thanking her. She starts to look over the paper, wondering if she even needs to be concerned about a case that is already wrapped up. She says that she feels so tired she could die. Something gets her attention, and she says that no matter how she looks at it, it's odd. We see her staring at a picture of Ed. It cuts to him as Lortel apologizes to him, saying that she was so out of it she forgot about the contract, and that he will have to wait and come back next week as he is at her merchant association. She says that as an apology she has prepared some tea and refreshments. Then tells him that his magic engineering equipment is ready, so he can pick it up at the counter. She says that she has an important appointment, so she had to dress up a bit, and she asks him how she looks. He asks what the appointment is about, and she realizes that he is completely dodging her question, so she awkwardly laughs, saying that it's something he doesn't know about. She asks if his cabin is complete. He says that it's in the final stage. She asks what he's going to do for furniture, and he says that while he likes all of the furniture her company sells, they're too expensive for him. She says that giving them to him for free wouldn't be possible, and then breaks one of the chairs using her magic, saying that woodworking is his specialty, right? And now that it can't be sold, she'll discard it tomorrow. He looks at the chair, saying that he told her it's too high-end, and then takes a sip of his drink, thanking her. She gives him the stare. We all know what it is, and she asks him how it's possible that he cannot show a change in expression. Then we see her put her hand on the table. She sits down on it, saying that she's already made her winning move, reminding him about the kiss they shared. She asks him if he doesn't see her as a woman, reminding him that she sees him as a man and she can tell what he is thinking. She says that all of the help she's offering him is because of her ulterior motives. He says that he knows what answer she is looking for, and she quickly says that she wasn't actually looking for one, as she knows he does not take fights he can't win. While he is acting indifferent now, someday she won't be the only one who can't contain herself. She says that a seductive smile is always the same whether the odds are in her favor or not. We see her hand trembling as she says that it's a merchant's nature to never reveal their feelings. Back in the middle of the academy, we see Yannicka holding her staff into the air, saying that they should start their lesson now. She casts a fireball and puts it in her hands, and says that Ed should try to focus his magic and form a connection with it. He says okay and begins to pour his magic into it. A creature begins to form, saying that it's pleased to meet him, and we are introduced to Mug, a low-rank fire spirit. It salutes him, saying that it's an honor to be in a contract with him, and in accordance with the agenda of the report meeting last week, he passed the first test and cleared every other round for verification. He says a lot more that I'm honestly not going to read out. Ed starts to zone him out. Mug says that his body is already on fire, but he vows to set his heart on fire as well to serve him. Ed explains that when he played the game, he once got a spirit-type skill, and he would laugh together and joke around with it, creating a strong bond with it. This is not the same vibe he got back then. Mug is so strict. She says that he asked her to introduce him to a good spirit, so she selected one with a good magic power efficiency ratio. There was a complicated selection process as well. He asks her who planned the selection process, and we see that it was none other than Tarkan cheering them all on. She hands him Mug, and he says that it's warm, and he starts to feel excited from it. She explains that when he connects with the contract spirit, he'll be able to feel their physical and magic power even when they are not manifested. But be careful not to connect too hard. It'll be hard to keep him in control. He says that if he controls the level of connection, the firepower will change too, right? She says it's odd to refer to it as firepower, but she understands. We see his eyes filled with pure excitement as he looks down at Mug, saying that he has now got himself a portable heater. You can pause and read all of Mug's stats if you would like, along with his magic power details. Pretty much, Ed says that it's an unbelievably useful tool that won't consume firewood. Yannicka says that she's glad that he's so happy, and that he always has an exhausted expression on his face. She tells him that if he needs anything else, she'll teach him about the power of connection, and that he will always learn faster if he is with her. If he wants to quickly reach a level where he can form a contract with mid-rank spirits, they need to practice spirit combat. She will free up some time and reserve the combat training room. Although she has accessories that increase connection efficiency, they're in her room, and she'll bring them next time. She then stops herself from speaking and tells him not to get the wrong idea, as she is actually a very busy person too. The only reason she stopped talking is because she remembers what Clara and Tarkan told her. About that she needs to play it cool. She awkwardly says that it's too much for her to teach him spirit magic for free. He says that she is right, which surprises her, and he apologizes, saying that he took her goodwill for granted and he should offer her some money. He quickly starts digging for some, saying that he doesn't have much to give her, but she stops him, saying that he's struggling to survive as is, so he can't waste his money. He's confused, saying that she asked him for compensation and wonders what is wrong with her. She starts to get flushed and panicked, saying that Clara told her about push and pull and that she should say no more often. Ed tells her that Clara is not wrong and she has a good friend. Yannicka then tells him that she's actually not like this with everybody while looking embarrassed, and then says that she'll tell him the details later and that they can meet at the combat training ground next time. She waves, saying that she'll also bring him an accessory and anything else he needs related to the class. He waves bye to her as well, and he acquires the advanced crafting skill magic engineering, earning an advanced crafting skill slot. The supplies he got from Lortel were simple enough that he could analyze them in no time, and he's finally learned a proper advanced skill. He casts ignition on his fireplace, and he says that if he runs out of fuel, he will use Mug, and if he runs out of mana, he'll use the fireplace. Now he can reliably warm his cabin. His living environment is now guaranteed to be stable since he has furniture from her as well. It makes him feel like a huge weight has been lifted off of his shoulders, and he looks out to see that it's already midnight. That's already late at night, and he should go check his traps. We hear Claire saying that it's pretty dark, and she should have probably come tomorrow, but no matter how much she thinks about it, she feels like there's a hidden mastermind behind the incident, and that the only thing she can think about is Ed. Everyone else at the scene were either students or staff of the Awfulest Hall, but both Taylor and Ed have no connection there. If they exclude Taylor, since he's already solved his end, it leaves only Ed. She came here because she heard that he's often seen here, but unless he's eating and sleeping here, he wouldn't be around in the middle of the night. Then she is caught off guard as she sees a deer's corpse being dragged across the ground, and Ed is carrying Lucy on his shoulder. She quickly hides behind a tree and wonders what's going on. She peers around the corner, saying that even if Principal Obel is a great man comparable to the Archmage, or the great sage of Sylvania, he would have to use all of his power against Lucy. She says that she was right. Her gut feeling wasn't wrong, and that the true mastermind behind the incident must have been none other than Ed. She also says that she should probably be a detective. She follows him all the way back to his cabin and watches him as he continues to carry Lucy. She wonders what all this is. He drops the deer to the floor and throws Lucy into her little tent, saying that the plans were for early tomorrow morning and that he should go to bed early since he has a lot of things to do tomorrow. Claire is still suspicious and sneaks over towards Lucy, saying that she needs to rescue her. She stretches her arm out, saying that she needs to be quiet. We see magic quickly come out from the tent, as Claire is surprised. Lucy is wide awake, asking her who she is. She tries to tell her that she is the assistant professor of her year, and then realizes that Lucy has already gone straight back into the tent. Lucy glares at her, and all Claire can think about is that she's like a cat. We see her eating her jerky, and then she flies off from the tent, leaving Claire there alone. Claire is completely surprised, saying that it is just as she thought. Then we hear her putting stuff down onto Glass' table, asking him if he knows of a student named Ed who was disowned by his family. Glass says that he doesn't remember the names of talentless trash. She says even if that's the case, surely he knows about Lucy, and that Ed actually overpowered her to the point that she couldn't use her power. Claire tells him how she was investigating the Awfulest Hall incident, and she went into the northern woods. Glass tells her that her story is all over the place. She says whatever the case, she used magic that records memory on the first floor of the Awfulest Hall. He asks her if she got permission for it, and she says no, she just lied to bring the memories back. Glass tells her to write a letter for explanation as well as an apology. She says that she knew it would happen, so she already wrote it, and that she can plead that there were extenuating circumstances. We see Ed sitting on the chair, mean mugging it, and she says that he looks like a mastermind, and that surely Glass can tell based on the super evil pose, that he is striking that she is right. He asks her if this is everything she has, and she says no. As she told him earlier, Ed was carrying Lucy while she was unconscious. He asks her if she is sure that he wasn't just moving her while she was asleep. She realizes now that she was wrong, and then we see her get out of his office, as he says that next time, just bring the apology letter. She tells him okay, and then it shows him glancing down, surprised, saying that while it was written in the files, about how Ed tried to stop Taylor and his friends, they still managed to get past him in no time. Taylor was born with the way of the Sword Saint. Alvira was born with the natural instinct of an alchemist as well. There is no way somebody as ordinary as Ed could have stopped them both. Then he is caught off guard as he starts to watch the fight unfold. It cuts to a giant explosion as there is a dagger smoking while inside of a log. A window pops up saying that crafting has been completed and the proficiency has increased. Ed created a ceremonial dagger with a spirit formula engraved into it for explosion magic. Ed says that he has had this dagger ever since he started living on his own. Now that there are all these engravings on it, he feels kind of proud. Mug says the more the equipment is used, the better its efficiency will be. Mug then says he wants to sing a song and starts going to town, and Ed picks him up by his wing. Mug quickly apologizes, saying that he wishes to atone for his sins. He is ashamed, but what he is ashamed of the most is not knowing what he did wrong. So please tell him what he did wrong. Ed calls out to him, and Mug looks over as Ed tells him to drop the formalities. We learn that spirits that have left their physical forms, and entered the path of low-ranking spirits elevate their status, through contracts with spirit sorcerers. So he can understand why low-ranking spirits are pleased to have contracts with someone like Yannicka, but he doesn't understand why he is making such a big deal about being contracted with him. He asks Mug if Yannicka promised him something. Mug seems caught off guard, and Ed tells him to quickly just spit it all out. They are not going to be together for just a couple days, but for the long haul. Mug thinks about it and says that there is no point in hiding, and he begins to confess, saying that the overflowing respect and loyalty he has for him is not out of reverence, but rather because he wants success. Being in a contract with him and receiving magic from Yannicka will allow him to grow at the rate of a normal low-ranking spirit. Ed sighs, asking him what else. He says that apart from that, after asking about rumors of his reputation in the academy, everybody said that he had a strong authoritarian temperament, so he tried to appease him. Ed says he understands everything, and with his situation, it is only natural. Mug says to be honest, he had a hard time and begins to laugh, saying that the spirits in the hierarchy act like it is something official and that they are so defensive when it comes to their ranks. Ed tells him to go easy on himself as they are just doing their best to survive. Mug begins to cry, saying that he can't afford to talk to him in a more casual manner than what he is doing now. Ed tells him to do whatever makes him happy. Ed says although his combat skills are still making slow progress, His physical stamina has greatly increased, and he is no longer inferior to the average adult male. His storage is also stockpiled with meat, vegetables, and spices. He can master the classes with simple memorization as well. He says reducing his sleep and practicing will cram the information into his head so he doesn't have to worry about his lack of talent. He says that every day is rough for him, and while they may not be gentle days, they are better than when he started. We see him slowly zoning out, and then he hears Yannicka calling out to him. He snaps out of it and she asks him what's wrong. He apologizes, saying that he was thinking about something and was zoned out. She tells him not to overdo it, and it is good to work hard, but he should value his health. He glances over and says that he needs to focus as he has received 3 letters today. The first came from the academy, while the second was from the merchantry. Neither were that remarkable, but he needs to read the third letter with full attention because it is evidence that the flow of the story has already significantly distorted. The main event of Act 2 was the negotiation for the purchase of the sealed grimoire, and it is still in progress. It was a tug of war between both Finya and Lortel. And that, Kreppenrothstaler, Ed's father, got involved, which eventually resulted in a 3-way conflict between all of the associations. Ed's father planned to use the sealed grimoire to research eternal life, and when things went south, he jumped into the negotiations. He is a boss who appears in Act 4 and is so strong at this point, there would be no way to suppress him, so he must exclude him from this episode no matter the cost. If he gets the grimoire, he will just walk away with it. If he gets the grimoire after already being strong enough to be the final boss of the 4th act, it would be impossible to clear the game. The letter he has includes all of Ed's father's actions as well as an invitation for Ed. He goes to tell us who sent the letter, and then it cuts to a man telling someone that he is back from the woods as she instructed, and he delivered the letter. We see Finya saying good job and that it was none other than Claire, the knight, not the female teacher. The principal came to say that the financial situation in the academy is bad as it is a private institution. She can't support the academy as she wants, and if they continue as they are, the merchantry will eventually get the grimoire, and it would be embarrassing for it to be sold for money when it's the heart of the academy. So Obel secretly asked for her help. She says that it's strange, wondering how Ed's father knew to participate in the negotiation. Claire suggests that maybe Ed told him about it, and that he could have heard the rumors, and that if he were in Ed's shoes, he would do anything he could to return to his family. We hear Lortel saying that she doubts it, asking if somebody of such a low status such as herself can share a drink with the princess. Finya says this is quite unexpected as she thought she hated her. Lortel says that's unfair, and if she did, why else would she come to offer her advice? She tells her that Ed's father getting involved is probably because of her father rather than Ed. Finya is surprised, and Lortel continues, saying that from the beginning, Ed's father had requested her father to purchase the item, but she had no idea about it. Even though her father lost his position, his plan to purchase the grimoire has not changed. After all, the merchantry has put a lot of time and effort into it. Finya says it's strange that the merchantry is planning to sell the grimoire to Ed's family after purchasing it, and it seems to her like the interests of their two families align. So why did the merchantry and Roth-Taylor family appear to be competing for the purchase of it? Lortel says that it's because she has no intentions of selling it, and given the current circumstances, it would be better for her not to get too close to the business connections associated with her father. Finya asks why she is telling her all of this stuff. She says because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and she'd benefit from keeping the Roth-Taylors in check, and she wants to obtain the grimoire. So it's a win-win situation. Lortel says that she also stepped in thinking that poor Ed might suffer harm. So it's also her looking out for her junior. She asks why she is worried about Ed, and she says that he's already separated from his family and living a new life, so it would be unfair if he were misunderstood as being connected to the Roth-Taylor family. Finya wonders what Lortel is thinking since she's actually worried about somebody, saying that Ed is definitely useful, and that she might even ask for his help on a personal level. But if that doesn't happen, then she plans, but gets cut off as Lortel asks her what she will do if he doesn't agree. Finya says that she'll have no choice but to use him. Lortel's cup starts to shake, and we see that it's actually because she is. She says to deceive and exploit, and she begins to cry from laughter, asking who is exploiting who again. Claire starts barking at Lortel for saying that in front of the princess. But Lortel simply walks forward, saying that for this matter, they are allies. And she genuinely wants to give her some advice. Finya should not try to use Ed in some half-assed attempt, because she will end up being the one used instead. Claire says that he will not stand for this impudence anymore, but Finya tells him there's no need. She says that it's confusing. She can't tell what Ed is up to. And there's also Kreppen, who suddenly joined the bidding war out of nowhere. But maybe Lortel is the one she needs to be wary of. Since even though she is in the presence of a princess, she still acts high and mighty around her. She wonders if she'll ever get to see Lortel panicked without knowing what to do. And it cuts to her with that exact expression on her face, asking what is going on. We see Yannicka saying that it's been a while, asking how she is doing. Ed tells her this is just how things turned out. As they are at the merchantry, Lortel says that she did not know Yannicka would be coming, so she only prepared 2 cups of tea. In an annoyed tone, asking Yannicka if she would like some cold water. Also annoyed, Yannicka says that's fine. But it looks like the warehouse is full of tea. But she guesses since it's merchandise, she can't offer it to guests. Lortel says that's exactly why. And Ed tells Yannicka he will take the water, and she can drink the tea. Lortel then tells Ed that he should take the magic engineering equipment. He says he understands. And it jumps to a whole shelf full of potions and other engineering devices. Yannicka says these are clearly brand new, and that Lortel just said giving away merchandise for free is against her ethics. Lortel laughs, saying that Yannicka really doesn't have an eye for goods. And if she looks closely, all of the items are defected. Yannicka gets annoyed, saying that she did this on purpose. And Lortel says that what matters isn't whether it's marketable or not, but that it helps Ed. Ed thanks her, saying that it feels wrong to take it for free. And he didn't even pay for the item last time. And this is already the 4th time she's given him something like this. She says that he should just come regularly to renew the contract and there won't be a problem. Yannicka says that surely it would be better for him to just finish paying his end off. And Lortel says that is something for her and Ed to discuss, not her. As they start to talk, we see Ed beginning to zone out, saying that he can feel a familiar sensation taking over his body. He says it's like he's floating in water, and that he's been feeling like this due to his workload. He needs to keep an eye on Crepin, who butted in. But there are still 2 weeks left to deal with that. So his priority right now should be making a mattress for his bed. He says that he can stuff it with feathers or other fabrics and a sewn cloth to make it fluffy. And that he also needs to prepare the deer he caught the other day. Along with cleaning the inside of the cabin. And he can't forget about making more jerky for Lucy. As he starts to zone out, he hears both Yannicka and Lortel calling out to him. And he sees them through a watery lens. It jumps back to Finya's area. As she says it's about time she acknowledged Ed's determination while fishing at his camp, along with his calmness while giving orders during the Glasgow raid battle. His reputation among the students is getting better as he is focusing on his studies. So maybe Lortel's warnings have more meaning behind them. She says that maybe her insight was off, and that she needs to make sure of it one final time. Which is why she sent him the letter asking him to visit her here in the royal residence. She asks Claire what time Ed will be here, and he quickly tells her that he won't be able to visit for a while. She asks why that is, saying that he shouldn't be able to refuse a royal command. He then tells her that there has been a problem, as he has passed out due to exhaustion from overworking himself. We see he has a status effect for exhaustion, and you can read all of these symptoms if you would like. It pretty much tells him to rest to recover. We see him wincing in pain, as he says it's hard to breathe. Since it feels like there is something on his chest. And then he looks down to see Lucy slumped out on top of him. We see her mumble rapping in her sleep. He says it's crazy she's talking in her sleep. He explains that she's much lighter than she looks, and to recall him turning her into a nuclear warhead before. But for some reason, he can't move her at all. He says that since she doesn't seem different than usual, it must be something wrong with his body. And that he's having a physical breakdown. He says even though it's his cabin, the blanket is new, and he wonders where it's from. Lucy then wakes up, saying that she is hungry, and he asks if she does nothing but eat and sleep. She congratulates him for waking up and begins to prepare some mana. She starts to inject it into him, saying that his mana was horribly distorted, and that he's been overtraining in magic and learning spirit magic on top of that. And repeating this for months is why he's like this. He asks her if she was doing this the entire time he was asleep, and she says it wasn't difficult, but it was so boring it made her fall asleep. She's also been walking on eggshells because of Yannicka and Lortel. She sighs, saying it was a hassle, but it was necessary. And that he shouldn't get sick, as getting sick is hard and people die from it. And he can tell she is pained as she says this. We learn that her grandfather was bedridden from a disease, and she watched him pass away from it. He thanks her for worrying about him, and then he looks over to hear Zix saying that he's awake. Zix says that he wasn't sure if he could use the cabin stove, so he started a fire outside. He sees Lucy on top of him, they all share awkward stares. She quickly grabs her hat as the awkward silence continues, and then she flies out from the chimney. Zix asks him how many women this makes, he says it makes sense though. as it's not unusual for strong men to have several partners. He says this is what he's learned as the openness of a civilization. And perhaps he's been viewing it from a rigid perspective. Ed changes the topic, asking why he is here. Zix says that it's because Yannicka is out for attendance, and Lortel had to return because she couldn't delay business. Ed then finally notices how long his hair is, and Zix tells him that it's because it's autumn now. He begins to feed him, but Ed says this tastes like liquid ass. Zix says that there's nothing he can do about it. And it would be better if someone like Clara or Elka took care of him. But Lortel was adamant that it could not be a woman. Ed says that he should double check this scenario and then says that he's heard from some students that mass-produced Mandragoras had caused an accident. We learn that it was due to Alvira, but in the end, Taylor and Kremlin quickly handled it. Ed says that this was Act 2, Scene 5, and it wrapped up nicely. Zix tells him that there were rumors about monsters sneaking in by the Telos Order. So he joined Taylor and dealt with it. Ed says this was Act 2, Scene 7, and it's gone great as well. Ed sighs, saying now the only major event left is the struggle for the grimoire. Then he asks Zix how long he's been passed out. Zix tells him it's been over 10 days, and everybody will be glad that he's awake. But they won't be able to see him today, as Yannicka is at the academy and Lortel had a negotiation to prepare for, so she had to leave. Ed quickly grabs the soup out of Zix's hands, saying that he thought it was just a day or two, and he starts to chug it. He then calls out to Zix, saying that he needs to send a message to Lortel right now, as he realizes he has no time left. Ed says that it's time for Act 2, Scene 10. As the struggle over the grimoire has finally started. We see Claire and Fina along with Lortel all preparing for something. Somebody else begins to enter the room. We see a shiny ornament on his tie, and that it is none other than Crepin, the final boss of Act 4, and Ed's father. It jumps to some time later as Crepin says that he's glad to see Fina looking healthy, and it has been quite some time, but he never got the chance to formally apologize to her, as he has heard that a member of his family gave her a hard time. They disowned him, but he would still like to apologize. Fina says that it's okay and not to worry about it too much. We see that Crepin low-key looks like he's got some baby hands as he strikes a T-Rex pose. Fina says that he's a noble, and you can feel the respect that his attendants have for him in every single action they take, but her eyes see the true him as she can tell he's clearly an evil man. He then calls out to Lortel, saying that she must be the proxy of the Elt Trading Company. She introduces herself, saying it's an honor to be in his presence. He says that he's heard a lot about her and the merchantry, and it's surprising to see her here. Lortel says that she'll go anywhere there is a good profit to be made. After all, they follow wherever the scent of money leads them to. Crepin says that he sees. We finally learn more about the negotiation for the grimoire. Each participant will write down their proposed bid price, and the highest bidder gets to buy it. Even though the treasure belongs to the Academy doesn't want it to be publicly known that they are selling it due to financial difficulties. So Principal Obel came up with a wise plan. Fina is going to vouch for it as an observer with her status as a princess. The vice principal, Rachel, will conduct the auction. It is very simple. Right here, right now, the highest bidder will obtain the grimoire. Fina says that she heard about this beforehand, and she looked into other book trades. There was a legendary book by an alchemist that sold for 8,100 coins. Another one about replication magic for 6,700. And then a travel log which sold for 7,000. She says that Lortel probably understands the value of the objects the best, as Lortel probably knows the prices the other books sold for by heart. Crepin begins to write his bid, and Fina says that the one who will probably take the grimoire home will be him. Rachel says that she has received the bid amounts, then thanks them both for participating. The key to winning this is to know the opponent's maximum bid amount, and that Lortel clearly revealed her intention to make a profit. Her highest price will be 8,000, as anything more would be hard to resell and be a loss. And that if Crepin bids anything more than 8,000, the grimoire will be his. Rachel starts to read it out, saying that she will reveal the bid amounts now. She says that Crepin bid 8,500 gold. Fina says she expected this as Crepin was not someone who would visit the academy just to make a profit. Rachel continues, saying that Lortel's bid was 9,400 coins, which completely surprises Fina. Rachel announces that the grimoire will now be going to the Elt Trading Company. Fina says it turns out she wasn't going for profit. Crepin makes an annoyed face, saying that they will be leaving. Fina is still shocked, wondering what Lortel's real goal is. And then suggests and then thinks about something, recalling how they are allies in this matter. And that her entire goal here was to prevent the scroll from falling into the hands of Crepin. But she says there's no way, as Lortel's not the type to act out of justice. Even if she did, there's nothing to prove that Crepin is an evil man. At least she couldn't find anything out about him. So someone must have requested or ordered this from her. Someone who knows the dark nature of Crepin and wants to stop him. She starts to recall Lortel talking about Ed quite a bit, saying that even after being disowned by his family, Ed is still fighting against the darkness of his family. And she realizes that he is the mastermind behind this. Claire quickly tries to support her as she is trembling, and Fina wonders what she has done. Wondering how she messed up by driving somebody like Ed to the road of ruin. And she begins to feel overwhelmed with guilt. But her misunderstanding might have been a blessing. We see Lortel looking over the auction certificate. And she's very excited about it, saying that even if she resells the grimoire, she would only be losing 900 coins. Even though she said she wouldn't sell it to him, it was just a merchant's lie. We see her looking down as Ed tells her that he doesn't care if she sells it or not. As Ed says that with the purchase certificate, she can ask for any favor. It could be anything that she wants. She says that he's made quite an unbefitting mistake of himself. A free pass for Ed just for 900 coins. She says that's quite a bargain. We see her laying on her bed, and her face begins to blush, thinking about Ed. And how she can make him do anything that she wants him to do. If Fina saw this expression, she probably would have coughed up blood. It cuts back to Ed, saying that in the end, Lortel ended up winning. Zix says that he should have seen Lortel's face when she delivered the letter, and it's a relief that Elka is so innocent. Ed says that Lortel bet on her sexual attraction towards him, and that Crepin must have bet on the insider information that he got. Then he lets out a sigh, saying he feels sorry about what will happen next. We then hear Yannicka screaming out to Ed that he is awake. We see that she hauled cheeks to get here. And Zix says that it's not even lunchtime, asking if she came here all the way from the faculty building. We see her out of breath, and she says that she's already done with her morning classes, and she'll do her other assignments tonight. Ed apologizes for worrying her, saying that he heard everything from Zix, and that he has caused her quite a bit of trouble. She quickly says that's not the case. Zix says that she was running around the academy crying, because of how worried and panicked she was. She quickly starts pinching his cheek to get him to stop, and then summons one of her spirits, which is a bear, to quickly snuff the life out of Zix, thanking him for telling such a funny story. We see Mug appear out from behind her hair, and then he quickly begs Ed to kill him, saying that he had no idea he was pushing himself so hard. We see him crying, saying that he wanted to apologize immediately, but he feared his presence might affect his mana, so he stayed with Yannicka. Ed asks him why he's making such a fuss. And we see Zix carrying the bear back after beating it up, saying that considering Ed was unconscious for the last 10 days, Mug is not overreacting. Ed says that he can understand why, since he was unconscious for 10 days. Something then clicks inside of Ed's brain, and he realizes that all of the meat he had would be spoiled by now, and that his fishing nets must have broken because he didn't maintain them. He lets out a long sigh, saying that he must mean that he has to start from the beginning again for his food supply. Yannicka says he looks like he's planning to overdo it again. She says let them help her. Zix says he also has free time until the next exam, and he can help with hunting or woodworking. And when it comes to work, Ed should just handle things as they come, and everything will somehow work out. We see his old shoddy tent, and Ed says it suddenly occurred to him. It wasn't that long ago that he was under that shelter in the forest. Not worth a single penny. He slept alone in the darkness, being swarmed by bugs. But now he has solved many issues and survived until now. He lets out a warm smile, saying that everything will somehow work out. We see Yannicka staring at him as she recalls Marilda's words about how tired Ed looks. But Marilda tells her that this is her chance. And since Lortel is busy with her negotiations, Yannicka should take advantage of this time. And that Lortel is actually quite clever, and Yannicka should take a lesson from her book. If she wants to win over a man, she needs to become a fox, and comments on her outfit, saying she looks like a housewife. Yannicka says that she does look pretty shabby, but Marilda says that it is perfect, which surprises her. Marilda says unlike her usual lively and energetic self, guys fall for that opposite side of her and she should be sly, subtly showing him this while pretending not to. And while she is at it, to roll up her sleeves and tie her hair up. To give off the vibes of a wife who will go through hard times with him. And that since she is going to see him today, she should focus on this and make some progress. For some reason, Marilda is considered a dating expert when she has no dating experience herself. Yannicka asks her what she means by progress, with her eyes full of hope. And Marilda tells her not to worry about that part. And then starts to ask her what she plans to do today to get closer to Ed. Yannicka says that she didn't plan anything. And Marilda gives her a chilling glare and starts to howl. All the other spirits wonder what is going on and why her howl sounded so sad. As Marilda starts to chew out Yannicka for being an airhead. She tells her that there is no better time to strike than now, and that the best way she can do this is by being with him in times of hardship. She needs to use her position as someone who will always support him. Yannicka tries to calm her down, saying that it's all true and that she actually does have a plan. Then we see her lean in and begin to whisper it to Marilda. She acknowledges it, saying that it is pretty good, and then later that night we see Ed complimenting the stew that Yannicka made, saying it was good. And he should learn how to cook from her. He heads inside, saying that he needs to focus on recovery. After all the help he has received, he can't keep looking tired. He lays in his bed, saying that his condition isn't good as his headache and fever are coming back. He opens his eyes to the door creaking, as Yannicka says that he looks tired. He is surprised that she didn't go back, and we see her laugh while blushing, and he wonders what she is planning. Ed asks her what she is trying to do, and Yannicka laughs and then sits beside his bed, saying that she's not trying to do anything. He asks if that's truly the case, and she tells him that he doesn't have to pretend that he's not having a hard time, and that it's the same for everybody. Exhaustion comes both physically and mentally. She knows that he's working hard while maintaining a rough schedule. A lot of people helped and comforted her when she was having a hard time, but in the end, he helped her the most. It wasn't someone's rushed support or comfort, but rather someone quietly staying by his side. She says that he has had a hard time, and tells him that he's doing great so far. He tells her that she doesn't need to go that far. She says that he first needs to at least acknowledge that to be able to rest, he needs to admit that he has had a hard time. He lays back down and says that he has had a hard time, and lets out a very long sigh. He starts to get sleepy and says that he's had a really hard time. We see Yannicka smiling while laying her head on the bed. In the morning, Ed wakes up and looks over to see that Yannicka is still asleep at the edge of his bed. He starts to laugh, saying that he's finally made a full recovery. Just like usual, for those who want to read his life skill details, here you go. Along with his matching engineering, and the formulas he has learned. We see that there are two that he is still analyzing. Ed says that he hadn't made as much progress as he would have liked in the last 10 days, especially in the research of magic engineering products. The advanced crafting skills greatly affect core stats and are far more versatile than general skills. The problem is that there is a clear limit to how much one can grow, just by self-studying. Most magic engineering products are rewards for main scenario quests. So, as someone who doesn't want to interfere with the scenario, it's hard to get them directly. But it looks like Taylor is not particularly interested in magic engineering. It's probably because even with the recipes, you can't make use of them right away, as you need materials that can only be obtained later on in the game. However, Ed's situation is different. We hear Lortel ask him what he's thinking about. Then he says the reason his situation is different, is because he is someone who can procure any material from around the world. Lortel says that she's relieved he's feeling better, and she was worried. He says that he's glad she looks healthy too. She says she may look healthy, but she's actually suffering from chronic fatigue. She starts walking over towards him while saying that her hair is dry, and her skin is rough, and it's been a struggle to get back to normal. She sits beside him, and he says if that's the case, why did she come here? She says that it's because she needed to rest, and there's something she needed to tell him. It's weird to call it the Elt Trading Company when Elt has already been removed. So, she's going to change the name to just Trading Company, and restructure their business. So, she needs help from someone to manage employees, assets, product flow, and other things. She's basically looking for a co-executive. He glances over at her, and we see her smiling while blushing, telling him to imagine this. He wakes up in the morning, and he goes to work at the trading company, and they're only a wall apart. He'd get great benefits as a co-executive, and she'd also give him shares and his own personal assets. It would be almost like they were married. She starts to laugh, wondering why she's rambling so much. And he asks her if she finds it weird that she's going so far for him. She's a bit surprised and then puts on her hood, saying that he does not know anything. She knows how he feels, and he must be thinking, what's wrong with her, or that he can't make such an important decision based off the fleeting emotions of a young girl. He probably plans to keep up a professional front with her until the end. He says not necessarily, but in reality, that's exactly what he wants. She tells him that it's because he doesn't know, after living a lifetime surrounded by money and constantly being betrayed, the most important thing to her is somebody that will never betray her. Somebody who will always be by her side, even if she has no wealth. She puts her hand on his, saying that even if the whole world turns its back on her, Ed would stay. To some, that's family, To others, it's a lover, to a few, it would be friends. But to Lortel, who has seen all these things, the fact that she could be betrayed is a constant fear to her. She says no more and no less, asking him if he can just stay by her side. He calls out to her, and then tells her to try it again without holding in her laughter. She laughs, saying that she's surprised it didn't work, and it was a shame as she almost had him. He says that the way her tone changed in the middle was too obvious. She says that she's human too, and her spine kept tingling, asking how it felt to see a proactive side of her. She starts to make puppy dog eyes, saying that when she shows a timid side of herself, it makes people waver. And she says that it was a shame, but it's not a complete lie. Ed sits there for a second, then tells her that his main goal is to graduate, and he doesn't want to leave the school until he's done. We see she doesn't have the best expression on her face, and then he says that he doesn't have anything set up for after graduation, and she begins to smile, saying that she can wait until he graduates, but he should know that there's not really a choice, and she might use the free pass he gave her soon. And she very warmly tells him that it was great seeing him again after so long, and he lets out a sigh, saying that he feels like something terrible will happen in the future. As Lortel walks away, she says that was way too risky, and that she planned to hand him the free pass, saying that he belongs to her now. But seeing how he was acting made her change her plan, and if she got out any later, she would have shown her true face. She says that she even brought the change from the magic engineering products payment, but it would be awkward to go back, and that she can just leave it inside of the hut. She walks over towards it, and as she gets close, the door opens, and Yannicka comes out, saying that since Ed went to the river, she should prepare something for him before he comes back. Her and Lortel are surprised to see each other, and Lortel asks her why she came out of his house, but Yannicka asks her why she came from the river. This was the beginning of a new disaster for Ed. We hear Mug telling Ed that his intake of food is not enough, and he needs to make up for it at dinner. Ed says he understands, and Mug warns him that if he collapses again, he will die. For both of their sakes, he needs to be healthy. Ed says that it looks like Tarkan scolded him, and that there are unreasonable people anywhere you go, and he apologizes to Mug. Ed starts to look at the letters that he was given previously, saying that, thanks to Zix and Yannicka, he has enough food and firewood, and thanks to Lortel, he also has furniture. The only thing on his mind are the 3 letters he got before collapsing. One was from Lortel, warning him to be careful. Another was a personal letter from Fina regarding Crepin's movements, and the last one was from the Academy, but the sender was unexpected as it was none other than Professor Glast, and he said that he wanted to have a private conversation with Ed. Unfortunately, he couldn't meet him because he was unconscious, but he has no idea why he was summoned. With Glast being the final boss of this act, and the final scene already beginning, he doesn't know if he should visit. He remembers most of the contents of the final scene. Glast always believed that a select few of talent would change the world, and to revive the great sage, he researched spectral magic, which could distort the laws of the world, and for this, he needed the sealed grimoire. But the Academy fell for Lortel's plot and sold it. In his desperation, he stole the grimoire instead and tried to put Sylvania's spirit into Alia's body, who was born with spectral magic. Ed says that it was literally a madman's narrative, but then Taylor stepped in and saved her, of course, and breaks through the secret laboratory along with all the traps. After having his entire scheme ruined, Professor Glast made an abrupt statement before falling from the top of the tower. Despite only dreaming of academic advancement, his final words, and then Ed realizes he doesn't actually remember what his final words were, saying that regardless, the final battle of Act 2 is all about the sealed grimoire, and it begins with Professor Glast kidnapping Alia. It cuts to her screaming not to get any closer, as we hear a familiar voice telling her that it makes sense that she's scared, as the demon standing in front of them is quite terrifying. She tells him that it's his fault, asking why on earth he is here, and that she hates him, and we see that it is none other than Ed, and he says that she's being way too mean, especially considering the fact that they were both kidnapped. He lets out a sigh, saying that he is tired of this shit. The Glast Conquest War is now starting. We flash back to 3 days ago to Ed's cabin. He says that he has finished everything he hasn't been able to do in the 10 days he was unconscious, but not being able to train in that period feels like he wasted a lot of time. Especially with the war about to start, it's a shame he hasn't raised his magic engineering stats, but says it makes sense as he needs blueprints and materials. Something clicks in his brain, and he says that he's thought of a way to rapidly increase his stats. He explains how the final scene of Act 2 has 4 stages before you fight Professor Glast. Among the 4, the hardest is Phase 3, the secret laboratory. The boss of the stage is the spirit librarian, Reina. She's so strong that it's hard to clear it without the sword saint form, but that's a problem for Taylor to solve. What Ed is interested in is the contents of that library. It's full of magical engineering blueprints, and there are over a dozen of them, along with 2 legendary grade magic items. Ed says that it would be dangerous, but glances over towards Yannicka, saying that it should be fine if he doesn't go in alone. It cuts to Glass telling his students that Adele and Alia will be joining them next semester. Even if they join midway, there won't be any disruption to the class. So, don't worry about it. Lortel thinks about how if there are so many talented people, why are there only 3 students in their class? And that it's only going to be 5 next semester. But it makes sense as there have been years where there weren't any students for Glass to teach. Lortel says that while Alia may not be great when it comes to combat, but she has an incredible affinity for spectral magic. Zix raises his hand, and Glass asks him what it is. Zix says he is hesitant to say this, but asks if the criteria for Class A can be strictly determined by talent, and that students who put in effort might bloom in unexpected ways. Glass then asks him if he thinks he is ruining and underestimating them by neglecting their efforts. Zix apologizes, saying he doesn't think so. Glass says the surest way to ruin somebody's life is to give them false confidence and vague support. Lortel sighs, saying that before she joined the academy, she looked into the faculty. Glass' self-righteous obsession with talent is because of his daughter. His only daughter, Miri, was an average mage, but he had endless faith in her. However, she took it not as her father's trust, but as Professor Glass's faith. Due to this faith, she prematurely joined a monster raid at a young age, which led to her being killed in the raid, leaving Glass a complete wreck mentally, and that he has become extremely obsessed with talent only after it is proven. All he does is research as spectral magic. The truth is, he's not pursuing the magic itself, but rather its creator. The great sage Sylvania is what he's after. He's probably only wanting Alia in his class to further his research. Glass calls out to her, then sighs, saying never mind, since it's not related to the lesson, he'll call her separately tomorrow. She wonders if it's about the grimoire, seeing that he must think it's a shame, as the grimoire is essential for his research. But anything he says won't be of any use to her, because the connection ceremony for the passing of ownership is already around the corner. We see Claire ending her class, and Ed is deep in thought about his plan and what he needs to do. He says that he will follow Taylor when he is barging through the final act of this episode, and he'll pick up all the leftovers. He's made a list of must-have items, especially in Phase 3. He'll grab them all in the Spirit Library. One of them is called Glock's Eye, which increases mana and proficiency in all affinity, and there's also Delim's Hourglass, which reverts all physical states by a few seconds. Ed says that these items may seem broken, because of the difficulty farming the materials, but they can only be crafted in the final stages of the game, so they won't be of much help to Taylor, so he might as well take them. While he's there, he can also admire how well Taylor is performing, and then return, back to his cabin. The Conquest War begins on the day the Grim War is officially passed to Lortel. He told Yannicka he lost something in the underground waterway, and that they should go find it together. He thought that she would hate it, since it's dark and narrow, but he sees that she's actually hella hyped for it. As he's going to leave, Claire calls out to him, saying that Professor Glass wants to meet him. He wonders why, since the ceremony for the grimoire is tomorrow, but agrees to go. The only reason he didn't go last time was because he was passed out, and seeing as how he was called upon again, it must be important. When he gets there, we hear Alia asking why he's here, and she's putting up some weird pose for defense, and he says that he's never even done anything to her. But it makes sense, even though it's been over 10 months since the last episode, her bad blood with Ed goes pretty deep, as he shot an arrow at her. But he wonders why she's even here, and that she's supposed to get kidnapped tomorrow. And then he wonders why he's here. He realizes something, and starts going through the paper on Glass' desk. Alia screams, but Ed says there are no research records, there's nothing indicating a change in the future he knows of. If he were to find something connected to himself, it would just be one thing, and that Claire reported what she observed about him. Which means that Glass now knows what Ed did inside of the Awfulest Hall, but wonders what that has to do with this. Ed hears footsteps, and quickly draws his blade, causing Alia to scream once more. The door swings open, and Glass enters. Alia runs to him, begging for help, saying Ed is holding a dagger. We see a purple aura as he begins to release his magic. Specifically, it is an aspectual magic called Time Prison, and he puts Alia into it. He then turns his hand over towards Ed, but we see Ed's dagger flying in at him. Ed calls out to Mug to ignite the explosion room, and we see Glass' face lighten up as it is soon followed by an explosion. Glass says he is quite quick to catch on to what's happening, and his response is exceptionally smooth, asking if he has scanned his research materials in that short time, but says it's strange as even if he did, It wouldn't be enough to tell him all of his intentions. Ed asks him if there is a reason he must restrain him, saying that surely he only needs Alia for her affinity with espectral magic, and since he has achieved his goal, there is no need to restrain him as he can keep his mouth shut. Glass says he has a goal here, so not to think of him too harshly. Ed sighs, saying this is too much and that he should at least give an explanation, but says there's no way he won't think too harshly of him. Even if he does manage to escape, Glass wouldn't let him leave alone. It would only disrupt the scenario, and if he is kidnapped here, he'll be locked up with Alia inside of the Seeker lab. It's like getting a direct bus to where he wanted to go. And he thinks about it, saying that he should allow the surprise adoption to take place right now. Glass is surprised as Ed steps out from around the desk, and Glass asks him if he has cooked up a plan, saying regardless it won't be a bad deal for him, while stretching his hand out. He puts Ed under the same time prison magic he did to Alia, and he starts to walk towards him while he is frozen. He was suspicious of Ed at first, but since Claire told him about him living in the forest and that he rarely sleeps, his effort must be crazy. Glass says that's not what she said when she was calling him a secret mastermind earlier. She says that's only because she didn't expect his academic record to be like this. Glass says that whenever he saw him fight inside of the crystal ball, he noticed his knack for combat was extraordinary, but it was clearly the approach of a weak person. Analyzing the opponent thoroughly and using anything possible is a product of effort, not talent. But he can tell that based off his facial expression, he's also not nervous in the slightest. Glass says it's reminding him of something he lost in the past. And that it's none other than his daughter who said she'll bring honor to his name through her achievements. He looks sad, saying that it reminds him of that memory again. Mug takes this chance to fly away, and quickly escapes the room, flying straight back home to the forest. He gets close to Ed's cabin, and inside we see Yannicka making soup, while saying that Ed is running quite a bit late. It cuts to an old man, saying that with this, his magic travel log comes to an end. As he traveled the world, he realized that there were many magical truths that he had yet to discover, and the title of Archmage felt undeserved. His late master, Sylvania, passed away at a young age and still remains in his memory as a beautiful woman. Looking back now, those years where he felt he was lacking were indeed full of ups and downs. The sorrow that ate away at his heart on the day he lost his master accumulated over time and now remains as only an old reflection. Yet in this long life, longing pushes its way forward. He looks down, saying that sometimes, regret over what has been lost paralyzes rationality, and there are times when he has the urge to shadow the natural principles of the world and twist the truth. Just to see Sylvania's face once more. What is lost is lost. We see a young Lucy, and he says that those who have lost must become stronger. And he puts his hat onto her, saying to be strong. To her who has become the full stop of his life, he dedicates the last sentence of this book. And all it reads is Lucy. And we see her crying after receiving the book from her grandpa. It cuts to her kicking her feet on Ed's roof, saying how much she misses him. And that she fully accepted the fact he was gone, hoping for the day that she'll wake up and the pain of loss will be completely healed without leaving a scar. The only thing that helps her temporarily forget that longing is the satisfaction of jerky. We see that it's empty, and she looks down to spot Yannicka cooking the stew, and that Yannicka starts to release a menacing aura. Lucy's a little freaked out, and it jumps again to the tricks hall. This is where the handover for the grimoire is taking place. Everybody here is either a scholar looking to sell or a merchant looking to buy. Only elite members have gathered here. And most of them are focusing right now on Lortel. We also see Obel is there as well. Lortel says that he's around the same age and has a similar image to Crepin, but compared to him, he is different to a strange degree. After the negotiation to buy the grimoire was over, he came to find her and requested her to hand the grimoire to him. That was her plan from the start, so she was not planning to be discreet, but still, the amount that would justify going back on the lie she told Fina is too much. Never mind, she only asked for 12,000. Crepin instantly accepted without hesitation and asked her if she knows about Elt hiring a mercenary group and heading here, and that he is telling her out of caution, but to make sure that things don't go wrong again. His information was good, and she found a place to sell the grimoire, and preparations were complete. We see a Glass telling Obel to relinquish the right of the grimoire, and that Lortel needs to step up and receive it. Lortel says now that she has this, she will have the trading profit, and then begins to smile uncontrollably, saying that she will also have an all-access pass to Ed. Purple magic begins to seep out of the room, as none other than Glass begins to release his spectral magic. He begins to summon some golems, and while Obel is busy defending, Lortel watches as he takes the grimoire and begins to teleport away, vanishing from this spot. She starts to get annoyed that her all-access pass to Ed is gone. Despite Ed's absence, the story is continuing as planned. In his underground library, it's back to Alia, terrified of being in the same room as Ed. Ed says that surely by now, Glast has the grimoire, and he tells her to be quiet, as if she keeps yelling, the monster outside might wake up. We see a man who looks oddly like the Penguin from Batman. His name is Kome, and he tells them to consider themselves lucky. I'm going to call him Penguin. Penguin says that Glast advised him not to use them for experiments, since they are important people. In a calm tone, Ed asks if that's so. Penguin sweats nervously, saying that he is much more calm than he expected, but he will be monitoring them closely while reviewing the research materials. Ed sits down, saying there's nothing more to do, they just have to wait for Taylor to bring the subjugation squad and free them. By then, the library that Taylor passed through will already be destroyed without any hindrances there. So if Ed manages to sweep up all the replica magic recipes, his operations will be complete, and there would be nothing he would have to do or get rid of. The only thing now that bothers him is how easy it seems. So he calls out to Alia, saying that he can't believe he has to be stuck in here with her. She puts her hand up at an X, saying that if he takes even one step, she'll scream, and she'll bite her tongue off, asking if he thinks she is bluffing. He quickly glances away, saying that he has nothing against her, and if he wanted to hurt her, he wouldn't let such a perfect opportunity go to waste. She goes to say it's lies, since she knows exactly who he is. He tells her to stop spouting nonsense, and that Taylor will definitely come save them if they wait. And she asks if he has the right to even say his name. Ed asks why he would not, and apologizes for the matter with the entrance exam, saying he had his own circumstances, and helped a lot during the Glaskin incident. Even if she can't trust him, surely she can trust Taylor, and that he will come rescue her. She's completely caught off guard that somebody like Ed would apologize to her, and then he lets out a sigh. Mug flies in, quickly calling out for Ed, making sure he's not hurt. And he says that it took a while to find him, but he eventually did, and that he's sorry that he could not be here sooner. Ed pets him, asking where he's been this whole time, telling him that he did a great job finding him. Alia is surprised that it's a spirit, and that he can control it, saying he was terrible at magic last semester. Ed tells her that it's none of her business, and he's just happy that he can talk to Mug. She says even so, that Spirit can send a rescue request to the outside, and to send a request to a staff member. Ed says there's no need for him to do anything by adding a variable, but Mug quickly tells him not to worry. He may not be able to keep him safe, but he's been thoroughly trained in emergency reporting, and it took him about half a day to avoid the eyes of the monsters and the golems. So it must have been 2 days, but he can remember it clearly. And how Yannika's angry face was beautiful, and he could feel her cold fury. Not only that, but she also wanted to ask Lucy for help, which is like having a million troops on her side, and not to worry, as they will be rescued and they should be calm. He begins to laugh, and he quickly realizes that Ed is not in a good mood, as he starts to palm his head like a basketball. Mug asks him what's wrong, and Ed lets out a sigh, and yeets him out towards Penguin, saying that he's changed his mind and can't stay trapped here, and to get him out right now as he is not joking. Penguin reminds him that if he keeps being loud, the demon across will wake up. Ed says that he's serious, and if he doesn't get out, it will not be him, but rather Penguin, who is in trouble. Penguin laughs, saying that after all, he's still a student, and not to ramble too much. Alia asks what's wrong with him all of a sudden, saying that he just told her to sit quietly and wait. He tells her to shut up, and we see the keys flying back towards him, as Mug says he was quick at analyzing the situation. Ed tells him to leave for a bit, and he wonders why he had to do something he didn't ask for. He opens the gate to let them out, but leaves Alia behind, which surprises her. He tells her to shut up from now on and only answer with a yes or a no. There are all sorts of monster experiments and haunted magic tools out here, so it's dangerous. He tells her to just cooperate, and if they notice he's gone, just tell them he escaped and sell him out, and they won't hurt her. He says there's no way she'd be able to run anyways with her legs having given out. She starts to ask him something, but he says to stop yapping and to make it only a yes or a no. She's hesitant, but reluctantly agrees by saying yes. He tells her to keep quiet and starts running off, saying he'll handle it, and he's annoyed that new twists found their way in. We can see on the guide for this episode that there is something mentioning Lucy, but we'll get to that. He says that he can only handle the minor variables one way or another as his stats have increased enough, so he can solve most problems by using the information. However, there are bound to be variables that he cannot even handle himself. If Yannika or Lortel joined, he could manage. But since Mug told him about Lucy wanting to help, he realizes that he has no solution to help, and even game freaks who spent hundreds of hours trying to, could not come up with a solution to Lucy joining in, and that she will lead to a bad ending. And it never happens unless you deliberately try to make it happen, so he never bothered, as it is a specific bad ending which makes Lucy a hostile enemy and to avoid her. Ed grits his teeth and starts hauling cheeks, saying that he has to stop Lucy from coming here no matter what. We hear Taylor calling out for Zix, and Zix asked him what he needs. Taylor is a little gassed out and has blood all over him, saying that he needs help and that they need to go rescue Alia. It is now the final chapter of episode 2, phase 1. Taylor lost track of Glast after he escaped from the hall with the grimoire, so he requested help from Zix. He'll soon lead his companions into the underground tunnel and then head to the underground waterway to chase after him. Ed is familiar with the route of the scenario, which goes from the hall to the underground waterway, to the spirit library, to the monster research center leading to the deepest part of the lab. But retracing in reverse will be a new experience for him. The research center is a bit of a headache due to Penguin releasing all of the monsters, but it's much easier now that it's in reverse because the monsters will be confined, and it's a relief because the encounters between Lucy and Glast are destined to lead to a bad ending, so he must prevent it. We see him peering out of a doorway, saying that the problem is the spirit library is guarded, as we see Raina fly by him. She is the librarian who guards the library, and she also happens to be a banshee. Ed is familiar with her patrol pattern, so fighting her isn't the issue. The problem is that Raina is someone who will grant Taylor a valuable experience. In the later stages, there will be enemies that cannot be defeated without Taylor's Ultra Instinct form, so if Taylor doesn't train well enough, the future scenarios will be harder to clear. Taylor is supposed to progress the most during the second episode. Taylor meeting the ones that will help him learn essential skills is crucial, such as the revived demon of the underground waterway and Raina who will give him the most experience, so he'll only take the necessary magical tools for the route and sneak out. He grabs one off the shelf as Raina hums, floating past him. He says the next one is the light dimmer, and he'll come back when it's over because it would be a waste otherwise to leave them here. We see bookshelves floating around the library, and it begins to shake. Ed says he's never experienced an event with an earthquake before. Something drops beside him, and he looks over a bit worried as Raina is glancing back directly towards him, and she begins to scream. Ed realizes this is bad. It cuts to 30 minutes before the earthquake, and we see a man on the floor as a golem, but he quickly gets frozen and crumbles to the floor as Lortel says if this didn't happen quietly, then the Academy's reputation would have surely been ruined. She can't believe the grimoire would be stolen during a time like this by the Academy's core personnel. Obel says that even if it takes time, he will take responsibility and get the grimoire back, asking her if it is not possible for her to wait, as whatever Professor Glast is planning, it will not end well. Lortel asks what he means. Obel confirms that now that the situation has turned out like this, he should at least tell her the truth, asking if she is aware of the 3 major taboos. The first is the pursuit of immortality, the second is the resurrection of the dead, and the third is time travel. She says there's no way he's trying to say that Professor Glast is using aspectual magic to resurrect the dead, asking him if he is serious. She goes to call him crazy but stops. Obel asks, confirms that she was about to call him crazy, saying that he is curious since the great sage Sylvania always said that talented individuals would advance the world, and there was his daughter Miri, who passed away after recklessly going into a raid. If he has truly perfected the aspectual magic for resurrecting the dead, who would Professor Glast most likely bring back to life? Lortel starts to think about it, and then someone enters the room, saying there's a huge problem that several minutes ago, Taylor was seen chasing Glast towards the underground waterway, and according to testimonies, not only did he steal the grimoire, but he also kidnapped students, and that they are first-year magic students. One is none other than Alia, and the second is Ed. Lortel is shocked, and then hears a dragon's roar, looking over, saying that if Ed was kidnapped, and Obel is here, the greatest mage of this era, surely he can help rescue Ed. So the most sensible thing to do is wait here, but there's a familiar sound, and the direction where the tremors are coming from is from the entrance to the underground waterway, as we see Tarkan spitting some absolute heat, with Yannicka crying while riding him. Lortel says that she would also like to go, and she puts on her hood, saying that seeing the principal being so nonchalant about the grimoire makes her want to go personally retrieve it, and she tells her men to minimize the negotiation personnel and follow her, as she is now officially joining the battle. We learn about a girl named Dorothy that is a third-year alchemy student. She is formidable enough to challenge those at the combat faculty, and people like Alvira often sought her guidance, but Dorothy didn't stand out during her first year, so Glast, who recognized her talent, was her savior, and she believed that Glast had a purpose behind his seemingly extreme actions. Though she did not know the exact purpose, she was determined to follow his request and guard the entrance. We see her falling to her knees, and it is completely fear-ridden. She says this is going way too far, as she is met with none other than Tarkan, growling in her face. Yannicka tells her to answer her, and in a very cold tone, asks her where Ed is. Dorothy foams at the mouth and dies on the spot. That's a joke. Tarkan told her roughly where it was, but Yannicka doesn't remember whose direction she's following anymore, and she starts to recall where to go, but her smooth brain starts to get a headache. Then she recognizes Dorothy and wonders if she did this to her, and says that she will make sure to cover her up. Then we hear Lortel calling out to her as she looks over to see Lortel. She forgets what she was meant to be covering up, and she puts it over Dorothy's face like she just murdered her. Lortel is obviously a little scared, saying that she understands that Yannicka will do anything in her power to ensure Ed's safety, and that if she succeeds, it'll be bad, as in her head she thinks that she's going to Princess carry Ed, and Ed will swoon for her, saying how amazing she is, and that it will lead to them ending up getting married, and having children. Lortel gets the thoughts out of her head, and usually she makes rational decisions, but anything regarding Ed, her judgment is thrown out the window. She says that Ed's already been rescued, and he got pretty hurt while being kidnapped, and he's lying in bed, asking if she will come to the camp right now. Lortel says if she's going to be the one to save Ed, she has to get rid of Yannicka first, and Yannicka, in her cold tone, asks her why she is telling her this, saying as soon as she pinned down the location, she ran here, so how exactly did Ed get through the entrance without her seeing him? Lortel says that's not really important, and Yannicka says now's not the time for this, saying that surely she's not planning on using her company's employees to rescue Ed, and she says that they're not even trained in combat, and that she is acting cowardly, but then quickly changes it to dangerously. Lortel gets annoyed, saying that she's logical about everything all of a sudden. Yannicka says that she asked Lucy for help, but at first she just yawned and walked away. She never listens to others any more than she does to Ed, and so she is also alone here trying to rescue Ed. Lortel sighs, saying that she's right. This is no time for them to get in each other's way, and tells everybody to please stay here and wait. Yannicka heads to the east side, as Lortel heads to the west side, leaving everybody waiting in the middle until they figure out which side he is on. We see Lortel starting to run, but so does Yannicka, as they both want to be the one to rescue Ed first, who, keep in mind, is still face to face with Reina. As the earthquake continues, the ceiling begins to crack as it hits Reina directly. Ed says that he wishes it was just an earthquake, but we see that it was none other than Lucy. As she stretches her hands up, we see that she's sitting atop the debris that covers Reina, saying that she got bored, so she came to help, and Ed says that it is game over now. It jumps back to Obel on the rooftop as he is being asked if it's okay for him to sit back and do nothing. Obel says that it's dangerous, but it's a good opportunity to let students grow, and flowers bloom where the leaves fall after all. He gets asked if it's really okay to push him this hard. There's no doubt that this is the golden age in the history for the Academy. Even if you look across the entire history of Sylvania, this generation of students is a rare find. After all, each year's class has so many promising students who they have so many high expectations for. There are countless of them who can all be stars. Obel crushes a leaf, saying that it feels like someone is warning him. The upcoming trials need to make them think that even if they are talented, they have to struggle. Back at Ed's cabin, we see a hole through some of the forest and that it heads straight into the mountain. If you follow the hole, you'll see that the ceiling looks familiar, as it was none other than the hole that Lucy took. Lucy starts repeatedly saying hey, 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 over and over, and Ed sighs. Her eyes shine as she asks if he has any jerky left. He asks why she thought he would have any here, and she sighs, saying that she's going to go find a place to nap. He puts his hand on her shoulder, saying no. The situation right now is a mess. Judging by the time, Yannicka and Lortel should have entered the underground waterway by now. He just needs to go to where they are and stop them both. Considering Taylor's growth so far, if he defeats all of the bosses of the later half, skipping this one boss won't mess up the scenario entirely. And the problem is Lucy. If Lucy meets Glast, the bad ending will start. So he needs to stop that from happening, and he tells her to stick with him for a bit. She asks why, and he starts to think about what to do. He says that somebody once told him that when the going gets tough, the biggest help a person can give is by being quietly by their side. He says Lucy is strong, and being with someone like her makes him feel safe. He starts to mess up the delivery, saying that just being present is good enough. She starts sniffing him, asking if he really has no jerky. He tells her to stop thinking about food and stay with him until they get out of this area. She says that if he wants to leave, she will help him escape. He says that he has some other things to take care of before he leaves. She finally agrees but says she has a favor to ask. Then we see her being carried on his back as she is slumped out. He says that now he has to get out of here by going in reverse. He will get everything he needs from the library and find both Yannicka and Lortel, escaping this place. Lucy wakes up again, asking if he is jerky, and he says no. And then we see multiple eyes glaring at him from the ceiling as bats begin to swarm out towards him. He stretches his hand out and uses his ignition, creating a wall of flames for the bats. His proficiency increases in the magic as well as his resonance. He says that this is the real thrill of mob hunting. He is being bombed by the special EXP explosion of the mobs and apologizes to Taylor so that he won't take too much. He continues to cast ignition while running down the halls. It cuts back to Lortel saying that there is a concealment spell cast around here and that her insight has been praised even by Glast. Unlike Yannicka, who specializes in spirit connection, Lortel was quickly finding the way. She says that right now isn't the time to exchange sweet words as she suddenly realized she genuinely wanted to help somebody with pure intentions. Her heart starts to beat as she puts her hand on the wall, as she felt a glimpse of a new kind of relationship that could not be bought with money. Her face starts to get flush, and she says it's the same feeling as before and that the sound is overwhelming her. And then she realizes that it is the sound of her heartbeat. The wall in front of her breaks, and Ed is surprised to see her. They are both surprised to see each other. And he tells her that he was kidnapped and he looks like he has gained quite a few pounds. He tells her to help him carry these things as they are too heavy to do by himself, and he starts throwing them at her. And she recognizes them as advanced crafting formulas. She shakes her head, telling him to wait, saying that she thought he was in grave danger. He says he was, but looks over his shoulder, saying that, thanks to somebody, he managed to escape. Lortel realizes this is dangerous and cruel. Yannicka is a coward who can't even take a chance, but Lortel, on the other hand, has been proactive in making progress, even kissing him. And when she fell on her way back home, she almost set the forest on fire. So how can he act so nonchalantly with another girl in front of her? She starts to heat up as he tells her to keep these scrolls for him, and if her company brings the materials, he'll go pick them up, and if there's anything she wants to buy, to let him know. She says that she needs to push hard here and take control, so she calls out to him. But he gets right in her face, saying please, as he has nobody else he can trust but her. She says that he's really crossed the line now, asking why he wants to make a demand out of her now. Her ears turn beet red as she starts to hear what he is saying about how he trusts her, and she quickly asks him if he needs a receipt. Turns out Lortel is nothing but a pushover. We hear an old man call out to them, and they look over to spot him gassed out, saying that they have a huge problem. It jumps back to Taylor and his squad. They have Clabias with them, saying that he would just like to leave, as it's scary. And Alvira starts chewing him out, saying that he needs to stop being a coward. Taylor apologizes to him, saying that they still need to save Alia, and to please do him this favor. Zix puts his hand on the back of Clabias, saying that he can't back out now, as he knows that Alia is a good person. Adele points out, saying that she can feel something up ahead. Her prophecies are often on the mark as if she can see into the future. She smiles, saying that she has a feeling they will soon meet a tough opponent. She points to the left as there are two ways to go, and then we see an explosion. We hear Claire saying that she does not know anything, and it was not planned, as it was just a whim, asking for a chance. Then she falls to the floor, foaming at the mouth, completely dead. Yannicka is on a rampage, since she got a double kill. Then she looks over, seeing Taylor's squad and waves greeting them all. Everyone is apprehensive except Zix, who waves back as they have the unforgettable feeling of the fear she instilled into them last time. As they start to get PTSD flashbacks, they say that there is no guarantee they can win. Everybody starts to flip out except for Zix and Adele. Yannicka looks at them, wondering if she did something wrong, and says that maybe she grilled Claire too much, saying that she fainted on her own. Zix quickly calms Taylor down, asking why he is acting like this. Taylor says that he needs to move out of his way, even if his chances are low, he needs to save Alia. Ed comes in, saying that is enough, and he comes from the right side. Taylor is surprised to see him, and Yannicka quickly runs over, grabbing him by the face, asking if he is okay. Alvira and Taylor start to get a second round of PTSD, saying that they have fully realized Ed's fighting style. With only basic magic and a bit of archery, he held off 3 opponents who were way stronger than him. And that his friends are extremely powerful, so they think that they are about to have to fight them. Taylor says that since the Awfulest Hall incident, Ed has grown significantly. If it was only Yannicka, they might have somehow managed to get through. With Ed being here now, their chances of winning are slim. Ed starts to walk forward towards him, and he says instead of it being slim, his chances of winning are 0. Ed puts his hand on Taylor's shoulder, saying he should go ahead and that Elia is waiting for him, and he continues to walk past them all, saying that it is time for Taylor to go play his role, and that he will play his own as he will go back and take care of the variables who have arrived. He is going to catch Elt. The issue reported by the old man was bound to blow up, as it was news that Elt has just arrived. The mid-boss of the second episode in the original story was defeated, without even a chance to recover. Elt fell from power at a different time than what was originally meant to happen, and because of that, he was able to escape, unlike in the original story. Lortel knew that he was planning a counterattack, and despite that, it looks like he made use of the loophole. With many personnel from a trading company stuck here, they still got all the magical engineering crafting formulas and so many magical tools. But if they were to name the best tool to have for surviving this world, it is undoubtedly the advantage of Ed knowing their future. The scenario that is unfolding right now is the final part of episode 2. The glass subjugation battle is nearing its end. The plan to have the storyline unfold as per the original story is still the same. If Elt is the mid-boss of episode 2, then he must have him in episode 2 just like in the original story. He calls out to Zix, saying that from here onwards the path is clear, and asks Elia for the details after they rescue her. And then says he has something to tell Taylor too. It starts to think about how in the end, Taylor has to be the one to sort out the scenario. Only after mastering all the unique skills and completing his growth, can Taylor face that guy in the final scenario. There is a lot of stuff to sort out inside of the underground waterway. After this, the magic tower summoned by Glast will cover the sky, unleashing dreadful spells. It will be painful and, going forward, there will be many harsh trials, which are hard for a human to endure alone. Taylor waits in anticipation for what Ed has to say, and all Ed says is good luck, since Ed knows he doesn't need to make any grand speeches for him. They head out, talking about how Elt is targeting the trading company. Lortel says that to secure evidence that she orchestrated the loss from the sale of the armor, which made him lose his position, that must be his goal. Ed says that they should first inform the academy about the mercenaries. Yannicka says to wait a minute. Ed says that they need to hurry. She grits her teeth and stands still, shouting, saying he's going to get hurt again, asking if he's really going to deal with the Golden King Elt by himself. She doesn't know the details, but he was just kidnapped and barely escaped. She starts to tear up, saying that he just collapsed a few days ago from overworking himself, and that this is a matter for the trading company, and has nothing to do with him, and she doesn't want him to get hurt anymore. Ed says that she's right, this is indeed someone else's matter, but it's not like he can say that he has to deal with him for the scenario to line up. Fortunately, to capture Elt, Lortel will need both Ed and Yannicka, so she'll make an excuse to drag them along. But to his surprise, Lortel says that Yannicka is right, involving Ed in this is just her being selfish, and Ed should be resting somewhere safe. Ed says it's nice to see the two of them getting along, but it's not the time for them to be resting. He says he appreciates the sentiment, but unfortunately, Lortel's matters aren't someone else's business to him. They both give off very different reactions. While Lortel starts twiddling her fingers, Yannicka asks him what he means. He says that they need to hurry first, and he'll explain on the way. They start running, and he says that it's not someone else's business, and then he starts to think about an excuse to give. Yannicka comes in clutch, saying, of course, it's not someone else's business, because he has a contract with Lortel. She starts twirling her hair out of nervousness, saying that if she loses control of the trading company, his magical engineering supplies would be disrupted too. So it's definitely not someone else's problem. Ed glances over at her, realizing that she's actually cooking, saying that yes, she is right. Lortel's still in her feels, and he says that he's surprised Yannicka is so smart. All of this aside, he looks around at all of the golems, saying this is complete chaos. Obviously, this is all done by Yannicka. But he doesn't know this, and he says that Taylor has no regard for seniority in this situation, and that he's heartless. Then he sees Yannicka picking up her cloth off of Dorothy's face, realizing that she did this. She quickly says that she didn't, and it just ended up like this, and that she's not heartless, so don't misunderstand. They are almost at the exit now, and that they need to quickly reach the academy to ask for help. Lortel says that the carriage she came in is still at the entrance, but when they get there, they see it broken into pieces, and all of her men are face first on the floor. She laughs, saying that that was faster than she expected, as she sees none other than Elt there. Elt says that he taught her how to manage documents, so there wouldn't be evidence in the company's records, even if he were to scour through them. However, there was a gap in personal management. All it took was a simple threat to the old man, and he instantly folded. We see him looking away while apologizing. Elt says he knew she would smile now, and it took a long time for her to master that expression. He snaps his fingers, saying that it's a waste to ruin her with torture. Her subordinates in the water quickly open their eyes, and swing towards Ed with their blades. Lortel blocks their attacks using magical barriers, asking where they think they're attacking. She says that she figured Elt wouldn't be alone, but he really loves bringing mercenaries into the academy. Elt confirms that Glast fled with the grimoire, saying that there's no need to compare this to last time. And we see archers on the ready, as he says this time is different, as they are the continent's best mercenaries, and that they are entirely surrounded by a small militia. Elt says that excluding Lortel, he doesn't care about the lives of the others, and that they should finish them off quickly. They fire off their arrows, and as the volley flies in towards the group, neither Ed nor Yannicka panic. As it gets right at Ed's face, we see it break with magic, as he had full trust in Yannicka's defensive magic to negate all of the arrows. She tells him to be careful, and that their movements are definitely well coordinated. He thanks her, and looks over as Elt says spirit sorcerers are always a hassle. He reaches into his pocket, saying that he already said that this time would be different, and we see him holding some kind of paper with a formula on it. It is a legendary grade magical item called Belarus's Prejudice, which suppresses the surrounding mana for 10 minutes. Ed says that despite being a single-use item, it costs dozens of golds per sheet, and based on the magic restriction of the night butterfly reagent that Alvira used, Belarus's Prejudice is a high-ranking variant. It has the drawbacks of taking time to activate, and the preparations to trigger it being fatally obvious, but it's a very dangerous item. They are at a numerical disadvantage, and they have a mercenary group in front of them. Most importantly, their entire party consists solely of mages. Lortel says that he already knew their powers, so he didn't come unprepared. If that thing activates, they are done for. Ed then warns him that the academy is going to treat him accountable for this, asking how he plans to deal with that. Elt laughs, saying that it's better than losing his life, isn't it? Ed says that a third-rate villain who should have been eliminated early in the story, can cause a butterfly effect that would ruin the world, and he knows it well because he is the same. If Elt survives as a mid-rank boss, how big of a variable will he have in this world? He's a villain who gets backstabbed by Lortel and exits the stage in the end, as he killed her real parents, and he did whatever it took to achieve his glory. He's an absolute villain to the core, yet he doesn't feel any animosity towards him, because ultimately Elt is persistently blocking their path so he can survive, which is no different than what Ed has been doing thus far, but he has no intention of giving in. He also doesn't want to lie and say it's because he's ready to handle all the variables he's created, and he tells Lucy it's time to lock the fuck in. She steps off of his back and starts to yawn, and she says that she is tired of everybody waking her up. Just her opening her eyes sends out a strong aura that makes everybody freeze in fear. We see the purple mana emanating from her, and Ed says that it's finally time for Lucy the Slothful to awaken. Before we get to see her do anything cool, it flashbacks us to the book Glock's Travel written by the Archmage in the final years of his life. It was crafted in a humble little cabin that didn't quite match his fame, and was known by almost nobody. We hear him talking to Lucy, saying that she may have natural talent and the blessing of the stars. But that is not a reason to stop learning, and to always continue to learn and be humble. Beware of the loneliness that will slowly engulf her one day, as overwhelming strength is bound to come with bitter solitude. She seems bored, and he says that he'll stop here and to just promise her 3 things. This catches her attention, and he says, do not kill anybody, and to avoid anything that might stain those small hands of hers with blood, and to live the life of a student at least during her time in Sylvania. Back to the present, and we see her ready to go. It's evident that Elt prepared the best mercenaries from the fact that they are all veterans, as everybody knows the saying, beware of an old man in a profession where they die young. They all had an instinctive sense of awareness honed to become pretty much second nature. Their instincts were screaming at them that they should stop right here, as Lucy started to walk through them. Elt starts yelling at them, asking if they have all gone mad and to move. One of them says that he doesn't know what kind of magic this is, and obviously, since he's a young one, he does not have his survival instincts, so he leaps towards Lucy. She glances over at him, and despite being a mage, she doesn't use magic that often. We see her launch something into the man's stomach, beginning to twist it violently, as she used physical force generated from the compression of mana. The man gets absolutely obliterated, and Ed says, to put it in simple terms, that was pure violence. Elt says that it's still not time for it to activate, and he just needs a little more time. Lucy says that he must be the leader, and she prepares her finger to flick him, saying that she just has to take him down now. Ed puts his hand on her shoulder to calm her down, and she instantly starts to power down. Poor Elt pissed his pants. Ed says that she should stop, and then begins to feel the ground shake, and he turns around, asking if it was an earthquake. As purple lightning soars through the sky, he says on the night when the 7 brightest stars align in a straight line, Professor Glass says spectral magic distorts the law of nature, and that it is none other than the descent of the magical realm, as we see his tower beginning to form in the academy. Ed says that this is the magic tower that covered the sky in the final stage of episode 2, and that is great timing. Taylor should have defeated the monster in the underground waterway by now, and learned the necessary skills. Now that everyone is ready to clear this, it might take some time, but Taylor will be able to stop Glass. Descent of the Magic Realm is triggered at the same time as it was in the original storyline, which means that it's progressing without any issues. Of course, since this magic is so different than any other, everyone is confused except for him, as this is beyond comprehension for both Yannicka and Lortel. But of course, Lucy says that each of the 10 towers plays a role in absorbing aspectual magic, and she starts to fly up, saying that it actually might be possible. The resurrection of the dead, that is. Ed realizes this is bad. He says that usually she would just wake up on the roof of the Tricks Hall. But if you wake her up early and bring her to the party, the cornered Glass makes her an offer that the person resurrected with aspectual magic won't be Sylvania but her disciple, Archmage Glocht, which is how Lucy turns into an enemy. At the same time, the players' party gets annihilated, leaving them with bad ending number 27, and you only watch her slowly disappear into the underground waterway. She was never meant to be defeated, and even the most hardcore and dedicated players who spent hundreds of hours trying to find a way to come to a conclusion said that there was no way to defeat her. Unexpected disruptions in the main scenario caused by variables that weren't of the original plot can still be patched up by his intervention. We see Elt grip onto his magic item, saying that sometimes these variables can prevent the bad endings, and for the next 10 minutes, all magic in the vicinity will be suppressed, as Belarus's prejudice is finally awake. The magic starts to suppress Lucy from ending everybody, and Elt tells his mercenaries it's time to attack, since they can't use magic anymore. One of them flies in towards Ed, and he sticks his palm out, saying, "Wind Blade," launching the man flying away. Ed says that he too is a variable in the scenario, but there are entities that he can't stop. Elt is completely surprised that he can use magic, asking how. Ed says that even the overwhelming suppression magic of Belarus's prejudice has its limits, as we see it beginning to crack and overflow from Lucy's mana. Lucy says it is impossible to drain the sea using only a bucket. Lucy says that she has to clear the way and shatters out of her confinement, saying that she has somewhere she needs to go. Elt's experience is no lesser than a veteran's mercenaries, and he understands that he is just moments away from being crushed to death by Lucy, as he was being warned of certain death. She starts to charge her flick. Ed says, surely Elt knows that he will die here. Lucy knows this too. However, unless she thinks it's okay to kill others to stop here, it's odd for Ed to be concerned about Elt's life, but she starts to recall her grandpa saying not to kill anybody and avoiding anything staining her hands. And Lucy starts to realize that the one that Ed is worried about is not Elt as he stares at her. The magic from her hand disappears, and she turns, saying okay. And he asks her where she is going. She says that it's over, so she has somewhere to go. And he asks her if she's sure that she won't regret it. She says that she didn't expect anything from Ed, since the conversations always end up like this. She stops flying away, and Ed waits in anticipation for what she has to say. She looks a little sad, and recalls the last chapter of her grandpa's travel log, and how it says that what's lost is lost, and that she must become stronger, and that he dedicated the last sentence of this book to her. And that his final words were none other than her name, Lucy. She says no, and then teleports away, vanishing before Ed's eyes. It jumps to Yannicka helping the mercenaries, all leave by boat, saying that it's time to head back now. We see Ed gassed out, running up the hill, saying that deciding how to handle Elt is on the back burner for now. They can hand the company over for now, and that Lortel will probably take care of most of the work. After all, she herself must end the bad blood with him. Maybe it's because he overexerted himself while he was already exhausted, but rushing to the highest building in Sylvania makes his body feel heavy as it is none other than the Tricks Hall. The starting point of this episode. The place where Glass stole the grimoire and where Taylor started chasing him. The academy took care of the injured, so he did not expect to return here, but he came all the way here in the end. Though unintentional, his reverse journey through the stages of this episode from the secret laboratory to here has come together perfectly. This is where Taylor started, and this is where his journey will end, as he sees Lucy sitting on the rooftop. He walks over towards her, saying that her grandpa donated most of his money towards the academy. So to her, She thinks of it as akin to her grandfather's legacy. If you've watched till the end, comment, Meatloaf, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.